Hello everyone. Just finishing up some last minute preparations for tea time. I'll go to my channel so that way I can see all your comments. Alright, we got Tyler. Hello Tyler. Hello Steve. Hello Ken. Hello Willem. Yeah, so hello Ron and Victor and Brock if you're still here. Hello Granny Gaming. And thank you Tristan for upgrading. So yeah, I know I've missed a lot of Wednesday tea times, so I wanted to make sure that I tried to do one today. So let me just set up a plate. So I have my, where is it? McVitie's chocolate covered digestives. I call them tea biscuits because people go like, what in the world are digestives? But let's see. People think like they're like some kind of medicated food or something, but they're not. They're just tea biscuits. Okay. So I'll put that there. And okay. That goes back in the fridge. And then I have some chocolate chip cookies here, which will be excellent. Gosh, I just realized it's been weeks since I did some kind of tea sandwich. I'm gonna have to do that soon. Maybe I can do that on Sunday. Okay, let's see here. I think I have everything. Yeah. Alright, let me get seated. Okay. So Victor says, glad you didn't miss this Wednesday. I know, I've been missing them a lot. Oh, I need some kind of napkin or something, or else the chocolate will get everywhere. But I'll go ahead and start the water, because I am thirsty for tea. So many wires and cables everywhere. Carter Asher says, what are you going to buy at the 9/11 museum? I'm guessing because I was talking about how my friend Chris and I, when we go on our UK trip, we're going to stop at New York, you know, obviously to catch the ship on the way to Southampton. I don't really know what they sell at the 9/11 museum, so I can't really say. But if I think there's something that I would really like to have as, I don't know, something that'll bring me peace or something, or will remind me or something, then I will buy it. But otherwise, I'm going to try to save most of the things I buy for my trip to the UK because, you know, I would like to bring back memorabilia as opposed to hauling memorabilia over there and then back. Because I think we'll have more time when we first come to New York to catch the ship as opposed to when we come back. So Yeah, so we will see. Let's see. Today we will have Irish breakfast tea because I don't drink enough of it. It's funny because my Earl Grey, it comes in a package with like 3 different teas. I could get an individual Earl Grey, and I do. I have one because I drink so much of it. But this one is my least favorite of them. I don't dislike it. It's just my least favorite. And so I tend to drink the others more. But I have to remember to drink this one down, because otherwise it'll just go to waste. My family, whenever they have tea with me, they prefer the Earl Grey as well. It's just everybody's favorite. Twinings does really good at Earl Grey tea. So, but the Irish breakfast tea, I have to be careful with it because it's really a strong flavor. And so if I overdo it, it's just kind of like really bitter. What's kind of funny is, now that I look at it, it reminds me a lot of the Indian tea that I use to make chai tea. So that's only 2 teaspoons. Oh, that's good. Hold on, let me get to some questions here. Willem says, hey Alex, any ships but not Cunard you could travel back in time, if you could travel back in time, what ship would you sail on? Again, not from Cunard. If it wasn't from Cunard and I wanted to travel on a ship, I would probably choose the RMS Oceanic from 1899. I think that's a beautiful ship. I would probably choose I think it's called the City of Paris, which is from 1910. I think there's the SS France from 1912. I like those ships a lot. I like pre-war ocean liners a lot. And then, of course, I think, depending on the situation, I probably would choose Olympic, because Olympic's a beautiful ship. So, yeah, something along those lines if it wasn't Cunard ships. Steve says, I was about to ask, digestives don't sound appetizing. Yeah, I don't know why they're called digestives. They're not, like, beneficial to you. They're not like a recommended. It's like, it's a sweet treat. So I just call them McVitie's tea biscuits, because as soon as I say digestives, like, everybody who's not from the UK is like, what? They're like, is something wrong with your movement, Alex? Dave the Rave says, hey Alex, love your channel. I'm one that just commented on your Queen Mary update video from February. Oh, nice. I don't think I've been working on getting tea time ready, so I don't know that I've seen your comment yet, but that's pretty cool. Thanks. And speaking of Queen Mary update, I got the footage from my friend. So my friend went on April 3rd to the Queen Mary, took 3 different tours, filmed as much of the ship as he possibly could. I'm not even kidding. He almost never put the camera down, and he has a really nice camera, so it's good to see in very low light. You guys, there is a lot of stuff that they have upgraded or fixed on the Queen Mary. A lot of stuff. A lot of little things, mostly, but then there are a few really big things. And it looks amazing. And so I've been writing it all down. I have to review all the footage again, because he just put it all together for me. I kind of had a little deal with him. I'm like, okay, I'll buy you the annual membership if you can just go there occasionally to film stuff for me, so I can make my Queen Mary update videos and make videos about the history of the ship as well. And so he was like, okay, that's totally fine. And so so that friend, in case you're wondering, is LMG Vids. So if you ever see him on my channel, or you see stuff I use of his, he's a friend of mine. So, but yeah, he went all over the ship, filmed almost everything because he knew I wanted to see everything. And there is a lot going on. The ship is abuzz with work being done. You know, I thought when people went there at the beginning of this month, I thought, oh, they'll probably see like one or two things being fixed, but mostly it's just going to be as it was. No. The place is abuzz with work, even though they're doing tours as well. So there is a lot of stuff happening. Like when he was there, he saw workers up on deck doing stuff. You know, they're repainting the davits because when, you know, the davits, I don't know if you've seen, but they have been really peeling lately. Huge chunks of paint coming off the davits. So they're doing that kind of stuff. They're doing a good job too. They're scraping the paint almost down to the metal. I think in some cases they did go all the way down to the metal. Applied a proper primer, and I heard that they're using actual marine grade paint, like the actual paint you would use on a ship, not on a house or something. So they're doing a lot of really amazing work. So I have to go through all the footage. He shot something like, I think in total he shot 60 gigabytes of 4K footage. And then we dwindled it down to around 50 gigabytes, I think it was. Something along those lines, because I didn't need every little piece of footage he shot. But yeah, and so he created for me like a 50 some odd minute video of everything he did, and shot it very nice and smooth, and then I'm gonna cut that up and use it for not just history videos, but my next upcoming Queen Mary update video about the construction. I have to review all the footage, write down notes of every single thing I see changed. And let me tell you guys, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff. It's really great. The ship it's looking great, but because there's a lot of work going on, it's a bit of a mess. But I can see the potential in it. There's a lot more work happening on it than I actually thought there was. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Okay, so that finished boiling. I'll try to answer some questions as I preheat this stuff. So Jeffrey says, how are you going to move the trains to your new place? So my friend Steve R, he built this train table for me. I designed it, and then he went and built it. And it's designed so you can, it's like a table. The top sits on the legs, and the legs are an interconnected system that can fold in like an accordion. So all you do is you lift the top piece off of the whole thing, and then you can fold the legs like an accordion, and then you can carry the whole train layout sideways, so it's like almost, you know, vertical, and you just carry it out with like two people. And it's not exactly the easiest thing to carry, but it is a lot easier than building something complex that is as big as this that takes up a whole room. But did I? Yeah. So it's designed to do that. I've spoken to the moving company because I never hire a moving company, but I'm getting to that point where I just can't move everything myself anymore. Like I moved everything myself into this apartment, and I nearly killed myself doing it. So this time I'm like, okay, I'm hiring a moving company. I spoke to the moving company. I told them how unique this piece is and how it has to be moved. It actually will have to be the first thing moved out of the apartment and into the new one, because if anything is in the way in the new apartment, you won't be able to fit this in. So even though the apartment's bigger, but it's just shaped differently. So yeah, so that's what's going on there. Put spoon in the sugar there. But yeah, it'll come with me, and it's designed to be mobile, without having to do too much to take it apart. None of the buildings and stuff are glued down. The bridges are, but the buildings are not glued down, and that's so that way I can easily put them away, and the whole thing can be carried with minimal stuff on top of it. So Ozzy says, how is the weather today, Alex? It's overcast, not rainy, but overcast, which is, again, nice because it's not warm or hot or anything, but we're still having some pretty interesting winter weather, even though we're kind of already into spring. Granny Gaming says, what tea is going to be this time? This time it's going to be Irish breakfast tea. I thought I had that there, but I guess not. Yeah, Irish breakfast tea. Carter says, are you going to QE2? No, unfortunately. The QE2 is all the way in Dubai, and I just don't see myself being able to go that far. I do have some interest. I do have some interest in visiting Dubai. They have like a few like interesting things. I'm not there to see the buildings, like not the big like the Burj Khalifa or anything. I'm afraid of heights, like you know, you wouldn't believe. So I wouldn't be there for that. But there are like things there, like they have a huge aquarium that's there in one of the hotels, and you know, some kind of interesting sights. But mainly, I would be there for the QE2, to experience the QE2, to live aboard the QE2 for a few days. Which is kind of funny, like, you know, when I tell my family, like, I want to visit the Queen Mary in Long Beach and stay aboard for a few days, and I tell my friend Chris, and he's like, that's all you're going to do? You're going to stay there? I'm like, well, I might, you know, if I go down to Southern California, I might visit Disneyland on one of the days, but mainly I would be on the ship. I want to experience what it's like to live on the ship for a week, you know, the way that you would have done, you know, when the ships were sailing across the ocean. So if I go visit the QE2, it's mainly to live on the QE2 for a few days, to experience what it might have been like. Granted, the QE2 is extremely upgraded from then, but still. Granny Gaming says, will you fly or take the Queen Mary 2 back? So when we go on our UK trip, we'll take the Queen Mary 2 on the way there and on the way back. The thing is that the Queen Mary 2 takes a week to get there. I mean, it could, if they wanted to, they could get there in less than 5 days, right? They could get there in like 4.5 days or so. And they used to, but now they slow down the voyage because they realize the passengers actually like spending a week on the ship when they cross the ocean. So, so it'll take 8 days from leaving New York to get to Southampton, and it turns around in just a few hours. So we wanted to do stuff like visit and see the UK. So we'll be spending about 2 weeks in the UK and Paris, and then we will return to catch the ship when it comes back to Southampton, and then take it back to New York. So it'll be voyages both ways, which is the more expensive option. But I hate flying. If I can avoid being on, you know, an airplane, you know, I will do it. You know, I hate flying. And plus, I love, you know, ocean liners. And Queen Mary 2 is the last ocean liner in service. So, you know, you gotta take it across the ocean. Hello, Chris. Billy says, have you tried Harney & Sons Paris black tea? Absolutely favorite. I haven't tried it yet. I have so much tea. I have a whole shelf of tea. So I've kind of been like, well, maybe I should kind of consume through all this stuff first before I buy any more. All right, it is time to start brewing. Oh no. Oh, that's the thing. I thought there was like, I heard like a leaf blower. I'm like, oh man, like why are the gardeners here at this time? But okay, it's just the thing, boiling. Hello, Pacific CY. Hope you enjoyed your trip to Disneyland. ScanFan Ed says, hey, Alex, you still talking about doing more Disney content, or is that unlikely? It will happen. It just won't happen as frequently as the Steam stuff, because I'm not as big of a Disney fan as I used to be. In fact, I'm probably not even a Disney fan anymore. I'm really making the videos because I promised people I would finish putting out all the videos I originally did and had to take down. So I promised people, I'm like, I'll put them all back. I'll redo them, put them all back. And I'm like, I gotta keep to that, you know? especially because some of the videos have already kind of blown up and people started signing up for the channel. So there will be more. It's just that it'll probably be on like a once a month basis as opposed to once a week, you know. So I do have a lot more, you know, ocean liner steam fans than I have fans of like Disneyland on the channel. Okay, so we'll empty out half. Empty this entirely out. Fill it up. Top that off. It's possible the next time I do a Disneyland video, it might just be about the Jungle Cruise. But don't, you know, don't quote me on that, because I may last minute decide I feel like doing this other one instead right now. So I know people have wanted me to bring back my Pirates of the Caribbean video. Yeah. Alex in the seaside of Bulgaria says, hello, would you rather sail on the SS France of 1912 or the SS France of 1962? SS France of 1912 all the way. Like I said, I am not a fan of many ocean liners built after World War II. I don't know why. I'm just not into the new look of the ocean liners after that. I really like stuff from before that. So yeah, SS France of 1912, 100%. I probably would have never stepped foot on the SS France of 1960. So, Rory says, if they rebuilt the Titanic, would you be a passenger? No, because I do not believe in taking a cruise aboard a ship designed to look like a ship that sank in a disaster. If they had named it, you know, the new Olympic ship, then yes, I would, because Olympic was a separate ship than Titanic, you know. So I would if it was Olympic. But if it was literally like, we recreated Titanic, then I'd be like, no, that just feels wrong to me. So I wouldn't do it. But Beluga says, what if Normandy never caught fire? If Normandy, here's an interesting thing about that. See, somebody told me, they're like, oh, I bet Normandy would have retained all her elegance and beauty into, you know, the 1960s, 70s, whatever. And I have to disagree with that. If Normandy didn't catch fire and she survived after World War II, she would probably have been altered over the course of the years. You see, when the Queen Mary came back, Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, when a lot of ships came back from World War II, their Art Deco elegance was then toned down. Because you see, the Art Deco era was like the last era of social royalty. People who loved the elegance, the class, the you know, the pomp and, you know, all that stuff. They loved the extravagant. They were the last people to really like that old world extravagance, that old world, you know, posh fantasy. And then after World War II, you know, people just became so the classes became more closely knitted to the point where you just didn't see such a extravagant divide. It was a different kind of elegance. The, you know, elegant stuff became more subtle. And so after World War II, things had just dramatically changed. And so ships like Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth, you know, they had alterations done to them, which mainly were about updating, right? That's what they called it, an update. But in reality, what it was they just toned things down. They toned it down and made it more subtle and just stuff like that. And thankfully, the Queen Mary and Queen... Did I even check the time I put that in there? I'm going to call it... It's been in there 2 minutes, let's just say. Because I got to make sure, so... Let's just say 4:31. I'll check on it. I think that's safe. I didn't even check what time I put the thing in there. Jeez. what was I saying? So, so they had to tone down a lot of stuff. Thankfully, the Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth were ships that were done in a British Art Deco style, which already was a subtle version of Art Deco style. I mean, look at the Chrysler Building, look at, the Empire State Building. Those lobbies and stuff, they had very, Art Deco look to it. But the Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth, very subtle. That was just the style of British Art Deco. And thanks to that subtlety, a lot of the Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth could remain as they looked with some minor changes. But Normandy was really early 20th century Art Deco, just very fancy, overwhelmingly extravagant. They would have toned down the ship a lot. So I don't even think that most of the ship would have looked the same all the way into the 1960s. By then, there would have been so many updates to tone it down and make it more modern that I just don't think it would have been the same. So, that's kind of one of the things maybe I should make a video about that, actually. That'd be a good video topic. Carter says, or HMT Queen Mary at Long Beach. Well, just a little correction. The RMS Queen Mary is no longer considered HMT Queen Mary. They dropped that title after the ship, is handed back from the British Defense. So it reverts back to RMS. Technically, the Queen Mary's title right now would be SS Queen Mary because she no longer has the contract for Royal Mail, but out of respect and out of tradition, you would continue to call her RMS Queen Mary, even though she no longer has the Royal Mail contract. So it wouldn't be HMT Queen Mary anymore. Beluga says, sorry, I feel like I'm going to sneeze. I did. Okay. Tiny sneeze. Beluga says, what was the greatest Cunarder? Now, everyone's going to have their own opinion on what the greatest Cunarder was. But in my opinion, there are two answers. One, the RMS Queen Mary. It was the flagship. It was the most popular of the two queens, the Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth. It had more fame than the Queen Elizabeth. The Queen Mary was involved in more things and just part of history a little bit more than Queen Elizabeth was. And it was elegant. But the thing is, though, that's if you consider greatness as something you earn, right? But if you want to say what was the most, fantastic, beautiful, elegant, over-the-top Cunarder that Cunard ever constructed, it would be the RMS Queen Elizabeth, because the Queen Elizabeth was... I think the Queen Mary is more beautiful than the Queen Elizabeth, but the thing about Queen Elizabeth is everything about her looks was refined, more refined than Queen Mary's looks. So in that sense, the Queen Elizabeth would be the greatest. But then you got people who are such big fans of QE2. They'll say the QE2 was the greatest. It was, so unique among Cunarders. And it was really unique among Cunard ships. So, I mean, but in terms of fame, popularity, beauty, and, all of that stuff that makes greatness, it would be either the Queen Mary or the Queen Elizabeth as the best Cunarders, the greatest Cunarders. I already went over on the time by a lot. Hopefully it's not too strong. I just gave it one quick mix. I just didn't want it to... Normally I kind of mix the tea a bit just to let it swirl in there, but I'm afraid it's going to be so strong I can't drink it. I should have set a timer this time. Whenever I want to set a timer, I'm paying attention to the clock, so I don't need it, actually. But then whenever I don't want to set a timer, I don't pay attention to the clock, and then I just miss it. So that's upsetting. Okay. Let's go ahead and... Looks really dark. It's probably going to be pretty strong. Okay, let's give it just a little bit more sugar than I would normally put. Give that a quick stir. And a lot of milk. Wow. It's got such a nice red color to it. All right. Bottoms up. Okay, that's doable. I didn't swish the tea around too much, so that it wasn't as strong as I was worried it would be. All right. Alex, yes, I do like the story of RMS Olympic. But the thing is, I probably won't do videos on the Olympic class ships just because, like I say this a lot, but you know, I know there's a lot of people who probably haven't heard me say it, but they're the people who are fans of the Olympic class ships, particularly Titanic, are kind of a subdivision of the ocean liner community, and they are very knowledgeable, like really, really, really knowledgeable about the ships generally. They can sniff out somebody who is like me and hasn't, you know, been that long into the research and stuff like that, and they can be pretty persnickety about how the videos are made. So I will leave the Olympic class ships up to people who are more well versed than I am in the subject, such as Historic Travels or, you know, Mike Brady from, you know, Ocean Liner Designs. I will leave those videos to them because they are very not, you know, Titanic Honor and Glory team, they're really good at it, so I will leave all that to them. I'm going to focus on other liners besides that. Carter Escher says, can Queen Mary go to war again? I doubt it. The ship isn't... I've been fighting for like a year and a half, telling people the ship is not so weak that she'll split in half the second she goes out into the ocean. But there is something to be said that the ship just isn't as strong as it would have been back then. She'll be fine sitting in calm water, but the second she goes out into a big storm, I would kind of worry about how other parts of the structure would handle a big ocean storm, you know, let alone, you know, doing troop duty or something. That being said, if for some reason the United States was so desperate for ships, I mean desperate, like they've exhausted every cruise ship at their disposal, then they just might consider spending money on converting the Queen Mary back into some kind of troop ship. And I know that sounds really ridiculous, and it is ridiculous. You literally have to exhaust all your resources before you get to the point where the United States would be like, okay, let's refurbish the Queen Mary and use her as a troop ship, right? But there is something to be said that in World War II, a lot of strange stuff happened in, you know, in pursuit of winning the war. A lot of money was spent in odd places. Look at the Spruce Goose. That was a contract originally for, I think it was 2 or 3 airships that, you know, could not be, the main construction material could not be metal. It had to be wood. you know, and it had to be able to carry at least the weight of 2 Sherman tanks or 750 troops. You know, it was insane, and they spent all this money. Like Howard, they, you know, gave all this money to Howard Hughes, and he went and constructed the world's largest flying boat. Even to this day, it's the world's largest wooden airplane, world's largest flying boat, and up until 2019, it had the largest wingspan of any airplane, including that Antonov airplane too. So yeah, it was a huge machine, and the United States spent tons of money on its research and development in hopes that it could be useful. And in the end, Howard Hughes only built one. It flew only a mile because, you know, he didn't need it. The war was over. He didn't need it anymore. They flew only a mile, and in the end, they spent all that money for nothing. So I do think that during a war, when you get desperate, countries will spend a large sum of money on something that might be their only opportunity for success. However, that being said, I think from this point on, our wars will mostly be wars on, you know, cyber wars. And if there's any kind of physical war that happens, it would be using machines and missiles and stuff like that. There would be very little need for, like, combat. You know, therefore there'd be no need for such large ships like the Queen Mary to be refurbished at extravagant expense just to transport people. So it would just be the most unlikely of scenarios. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Let's see. Ozzy says, when will you be moving? Unfortunately, I will not be revealing that information just for my own security, but you'll know as soon as I'm there. You'll know. And then, you know, as I get closer to the moving day, I may stop doing tea times, or they might be really limited tea times up until the moving day, because everything will have to be packed up. So, you know, as time goes on, I will have to pack everything in the apartment up. So, yeah. But I think even you guys will kind of like the new apartment because there's more space and I can do different things, and, you know, I won't always be viewed in the same area of the house. So, Chilling in the Frozen North says, hi Alex, hope you're doing well. I've made a pot of Earl Grey for this afternoon. RE ship's maintenance. What are you talking about? The Queen Mary? Yes, I was talking about the Queen Mary earlier. I gotta catch up on comments. It's just taking forever. Hello, Shiloh. Steve says it's called getting old. Moving, because I was like saying, oh, I can't, you know, I can't move my whole apartment like I used to by myself. I have to hire people. So he's like, it's called getting old. I'm like, I know. Carter Asher says, how many cars do you have? 0. I have really, really bad anxiety behind the wheel. I do know how to drive. I have driven before. I used to own a car. But I have really, really bad anxiety behind the wheel. Really bad, to the point where I've almost gotten in a few crashes because of my fear. Not because I was not a skilled driver, but just because of my fear. So I had to stop driving. So I do not own any cars at all. Hello, Doc. How's it going? Chris says, Alex, I would love to go with Shy and do rail hopping and tall structures, also urban exploring. You know, when I was younger, I loved that kind of stuff a lot. Now I just like watching it on YouTube, but yeah, when I was younger, I liked doing that stuff. Hello, Mike. Goofy Roll says, hi, Alex, quick question. Does tea go bad with age? It does. Some people will say, oh, no, it did, you know. No. There was one tin of tea I had. It was Earl Grey, and it was in my cupboard for almost a year. And, you know, I opened it, and I was, like, drinking it. I'm like, this just doesn't have the magic that it did when I, first drank it, and at first I didn't understand, but then I remembered, because I used to own a coffee and tea shop. I remembered that tea does go bad. It does like slowly lose its flavor, its zest. So I bought a whole new one, and magic was back. So it does. It starts to lose its muchness, and then you'll know. You're like, okay, it's time to replace it. Alex Seats out of Bulgaria says, from which years are your favorite ocean liners? It would be between the 1890s and the late 1930s. Those are the years of my favorite ocean liners. Carter Asher says, what about Disney Wish? I'm not sure what you're asking. SoCal Imagine channel says, got to go on the Steam and Steel tour on Monday. Nice. On Monday. That's interesting. Did you see an Asian guy there with a really big camera just walking around? Let me know. I'm serious. Like, SoCal Imagine, let me know. Moonzer, how's it going? Moonzer says, hello, did you know that the RMS Queen Elizabeth, some identical core doors to the corridors had identical. Yes, I did. I'd never, before the other day, I'd never seen a photo of Queen Elizabeth corridors, but I have seen video of Queen Elizabeth's corridors, and I knew that they were pretty much identical except for the flooring. Doc says Alex needs to attend a Great Gatsby event. I don't know. Sounds like a party. I'm not a party person. Lindsay says Alex, the Queen Mary has 5 telegraphs on the bridge. That I do know. Victor says, do you think Titanic would have stayed afloat or possibly just floated longer if there was watertight seals on the tops of the compartments? No. And the reason why is because so the reason why has to do with the fact that people were escaping the boiler rooms. And there's a possibility that in their frantic escape, they may not have even shut, because if the tops were watertight on the boiler rooms, then they would have tried to, shut hatches and stuff to prevent the water from spilling over via going through the decks and stuff like that. But yeah, so I think there's possibility they would have not shut the hatches just in their frantic, nature to run. And for that reason, I think that water still would have gotten in. But even then, it would have been difficult to have those sealed tops of the boiler rooms because of the way the ventilation worked. It needed just a large opening that went all the way up to the top of the ship. So it just kind of made things difficult, Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I have to say about it. But, the Queen Mary had some people will fight me when I say this, but the Queen Mary, in my opinion, had sealed, watertight ceilings. There were hatches and things to get out, but those hatches were, strong and stuff like that. And there wasn't anywhere where the water could overflow over the watertight bulkhead. Unless you're there was one area somewhere aft, but even then the tops of the engineering spaces were still sealed. So, and part of the reason why everything was sealed like that was to keep the boiler rooms airtight, so that way they could pressurize them. So, so that's why I say that. And that could have, on the Queen Mary, it could have prevented, water spilling over the bulkheads like it did on Titanic. But on Titanic, it was just designed entirely different for ventilation, for ease of access, that kind of thing. No one really could have predicted a ship could founder in such a way, So Cal says they need to put Alex on board for an in-depth college class on the Queen Mary. It'd be kind of fun, I think. I was thinking about it the other day, because I was watching my friend Chris's footage, and I was like, I would have liked to be a tour guide on Queen Mary. I enjoyed being a tour guide at Disneyland, but there were some aspects of the job that made it more challenging than you would expect for a tour guide job. But on the Queen Mary, I imagine it's like a normal tour guide job, which I could totally do, and so I kind of was like, it would be nice to be a tour guide on Queen Mary. Who knows, maybe when I retire, I'll go and be a tour guide there. I mean, I don't want to live in Southern California, but we'll see where I am in the future. Let's see. I forget what it was. I think one of the seasons of The Crown, one of the family members took either Queen Mary or Queen Elizabeth to New York or to Southampton. It was the former king, and they showed in one episode him arriving by one of the Cunard queens. I don't remember if it was Queen Mary or Queen Elizabeth. I think it was Queen Mary that he arrived on. Tyler says, do you think the Titanic community can be toxic? Well, I have to be careful what I say because anybody can be toxic, Any fan community can be pretty toxic. But just because, you're in the Titanic fan community does not by proxy make you toxic, But I do think that I've seen a lot of people in the Titanic community who are very passionate about when a YouTuber gives the right or the wrong information. And that passion can be pretty aggressive sometimes. So it's for that reason that I'm also just not interested in learning more about the Olympic class ships. It just kind of puts me off of it a bit. I mean, granted, I still occasionally watch videos. I occasionally might read up on something, you know, if it comes across my research when I'm doing something else. And that's always kind of like an interesting little tidbit to get, but I don't actively go out and research the Olympic class ships. I think I just kind of got put off by some of the behavior that I've experienced from it. So I just kind of like, I'd rather talk about other ships because the people, I don't know, the people that like those ships are much much less aggressive. Just put it, I'm trying to be really like nice about it. Ken says, I've mentioned this before, but as much as it would be great to have the QE, I think it's good that the Queen Mary's the one that survived. It has more of a classic look and is better linked to old liners. I would agree, because I think the Queen Mary... See, a lot of people, they go like, oh, the Queen Elizabeth looked so much sleeker and so much nicer. It's like, yeah, true. You know, they looked at Queen Mary and they went, what can we improve? And they went and improved it. But the thing about the Queen Mary is, the reason why the Queen Mary looks the way she looks from the outside and the inside is because they said, all right, we want a new Art Deco liner, but we don't want to stray from the traditional look of a Cunard ship. Cunard ships are iconic ships. You know, like Olympic class ships, the exterior of Olympic class, or sorry, not Olympic class, the exterior of White Star ships can vary dramatically from ship to ship. But Cunard ships have this look to them, especially a look that was established by Lusitania and Mauretania, and then continued on into Aquitania. You know, so when they built Queen Mary, they said, well, you know, we want the Queen Mary, even though they had to build an all-new hull, they did not end up keeping the hull design of Aquitania for the Queen Mary. But even though they had to build the ship all brand new, they said, it's got to look like a Cunard ship. And so the Queen Mary has that classic ocean liner look. She has a forward well deck. You know, she has the three funnels as opposed to two or less. You know, granted, the funnels were a necessity, not necessarily a aesthetic choice. It was mostly out of necessity to have three. But, you know, they had that. It's just a lot of the ship just looks older, you know. So that was kind of the point. So, Chilling in the Frozen North says to Carter Asher, per the terms of Sail to Long Beach, most of Queen Mary's boilers have been removed unless the Navy is exceptionally desperate. The answer is no. Let's see. Star Killer says, love the channel, man. Wholesome content. Keep it up. Thank you. I'm really glad. I'm glad that you picked up on that. My channel is meant to be wholesome, you know? Like, I have nothing against people who want to see a YouTube channel that is geared towards people older than 18 or whatever. You know, that's great. That's fine. But I wanted to produce content that was about history, that was more designed for a broader audience, like a family. You know, a family could sit down and watch my videos and feel like stuff is presented without bias, but at the same time, it's entertaining, it's emotional, and it touches on sometimes the dark side of history without doing something that I think could probably exacerbate people's feelings about history. You know, case in point, my video about the history of the New Orleans French Quarter, which was a very big passion project of mine. I love the French Quarter. I've never visited it, but I know so much about it already, and I just wanted to make a video on it. And unfortunately, New Orleans has a really dark history. Like, let's be honest, it's got a really, really dark history. And the French Quarter is founded on that dark history, you know? And so the thing is you can't tell the history of New Orleans without talking about slavery, without talking about, you know, all that uncomfortable stuff. But at the same time, I felt like there shouldn't be a reason why I can't touch upon that without saying something that could basically give people nightmares or make them feel enraged. I don't want them to feel enraged about the past. I want them to be enlightened about the past. But I don't want to make them walk away from the video going, "Urgh." I want them to walk away from the video going, we moved on from that. We are different from that. You know, and so that was kind of thing. I had a few people that commented and they're like, oh, you sugar-coated history. And I'm like, well, you could look at it that way. I don't think I did. I personally do not feel like I sugar-coated history. I told the history flat out, but I just did not delve deep into everything because I feel like that could be something that, you know, if the parents decided I want my children to learn more about that, then they can make that decision. That's not up to me. And I'm here to make a family channel that talks about that stuff, but does not just, you know. So, yes, wholesome is the point. I try not to take sides on political issues. I try not to take sides on social issues. I am a human. I have my own points of view. But at the same time, I try to just keep it history, you know. Steamships, Disneyland, you know, tea. So, it's like, you know, whatever happened to just being able to just enjoy a topic without applying all these different inferences into it, you know? So that's kind of my philosophy on my channel. So, so thank you, Star Killer. So Cal says, I still miss the Spruce Goose every time I see the dome in Long Beach. Yeah, when I would go to Long Beach with my dad, he would be like, oh, you know what used to be in that dome was the Spruce Goose. And I'd never seen it with my own eyes, you know. And he did, or I think he did. No, he said he never got to either, but he wanted to. And then it was, you know, moved before he ever got the chance. But then, you know, living up here in Oregon now, I live, you know, just, I think, like an hour away from the Spruce Goose right now. And I've already visited twice. I visited the Spruce Goose twice since I've moved up here. I love it. It's great. I think I'll go back maybe twice a year. It's just fun, you know. And it's part of a huge museum too. So it's, you know, it's great. So yeah, if anybody ever takes a trip up to Oregon, I cannot stress enough how much you will enjoy visiting the Spruce Goose. I can't stress it. Even if you don't like planes. I don't like planes. I'm not a plane. Yeah, you know, Spruce Goose is the only video I've ever made on planes on my channel, and it probably will be the only one. But it's fun. There's so much cool stuff about it. It's neat. And all the kids, you see them walk in the museum and they look up at the thing, and it's just this huge plane. You would never, you know, I've never seen an airplane that big in my life. I've flown a lot of planes. I've never seen one that big before. It's crazy. It's crazy. So yeah, if you ever visit Oregon, do drop by to McMinnville to visit the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum of McMinnville, Oregon, to see the Spruce Goose. I know that a lot of ocean liner creators watch my content, whether or not they comment, because, you know, they like to... There's kind of like an unspoken rule among YouTube where, like, you try not to, like... try not to impose on another creator's, like, content. So a lot of times they'll watch my stuff, but then they won't comment because they're just like, oh, I'll let him be him, or I'll let her be her, or whatever, you know? So I know that there are some ocean liner creators that watch my content, and I think Mike Brady might be one of them. So if you're watching Mike Brady, you apparently are very popular in my chat right now. You guys are hilarious. Chilling in the frozen north. Yes, the United States did refurbish antiquated locomotives for the World War. Moonzer says, what's on the menu? Today I have Irish breakfast tea. I have McVitie's chocolate-covered tea biscuits, and then I have some chocolate chip cookies. I have to make a new batch of Scottish shortbread, and then I have to buy, next time I do a tea time, I should buy ingredients for a cucumber sandwich. It's been so long since I've done a cucumber sandwich, but we weren't in the season for stuff like dill and cucumber. And while it's still available in the stores, it just doesn't taste right. It's like it loses its flavor over winter. So, kind of weird. Carter says, do you miss the World Trade Center? I've never been there. I don't have the prior emotional connection to it. I do remember what happened on 9/11. I was in 4th grade. I think I had just started 4th grade, actually. Yeah, I had just started 4th grade. I was getting up and ready for school as usual. Well, actually, no, I was still asleep. My dad woke me up early. It was earlier than I normally wake up. And he said, you gotta see this, this is history. You have to wake up. And so I woke up, and on the screen was that tragedy. At first, what I saw was just the first tower on fire. And then, some time after, just watching the news for a while, the second tower was hit, and then me and my dad both knew, like, this wasn't an accident now, and, yeah, and that's kind of when, things changed in this country. There was a huge change after that, but I remember it very well, and we did end up going to school, but the school announced that they were closing. So, or did they close? No, I did end up going to school. I did. I arrived at school late, I think. It's been so long ago. But I do remember having to go home early. My teacher was in tears, just in tears. She could not teach the class. And then they announced the school was closing. I picked up by my dad because he didn't end up. I don't think he was working that day. And yeah, it was just insanity. Just insane. I remember I was actually telling my friend Chris last night, because we started watching The Last of Us, and the first episode showed like what happened when the world ended. But there was a scene in the show where like jets were flying over, and I told, and it was really eerie because everything was quiet. There was nobody around, I told him that's what it was like on 9/11 where I lived. It was just quieter than usual. Nobody was on the streets driving. It was just weird. And then there was jets flying over because they were patrolling the coasts. They just wanted to make doubly sure, So yeah, it was just crazy. So while I do want to visit the memorial in New York, just, for that kind of closure, I wouldn't say that I miss the World Trade Center. I don't have that kind of connection to it. Carter Asher says, how many train cars do you have? 14. Yeah, 14. Once I finish building the newest caboose, it'll be 14. Alex in Seaside, Bulgaria says, do you think that the RMS Lusitania and RMS Mauretania were too fast for their time? I don't think so. You have to remember that those ships only went those incredible speeds when they needed to win the ribbon. They didn't go, 29 knots, on a daily, basis, when they were just doing their normal crossings. Even the Queen Mary, which was designed, to go 32.8, almost said kilometers, 32.84 knots. She didn't do that all the time. She did that when she was trying to win the ribbon from Normandy. But otherwise, on a normal voyage, the regular, you know, service speed was 28, 29 knots. With Mauretania, the service speed was 24 knots, I think. Maybe 20. Okay, I don't know for sure. I think it's 24 knots. Was that. So technically it wasn't going full speed, you know. So I wouldn't say it was too fast for its time. It was fast enough that it needed to do what it needed to do, and then it settled into a speed. It's the same thing for the SS United States. A lot of people don't know this because they've heard, oh, the SS United States beat the Queen Mary at 34 knots. So they assume the ship was always going 34 knots on every voyage. But it wasn't. It had a service speed of 29 knots. So it would settle down into a service speed, and because it was just the most comfortable speed to travel in. So so on a normal basis, the Queen Mary, there were probably a few times where the Queen Mary and the SS United States were sailing next to each other, with a distance of, you know, maybe a couple thousand feet between each other, you know. But they would be sailing next to each other. So, yeah, it's just, yeah. So Cal says, amazing to get back on the ship. Thanks for supporting the reopening. Our tour was at 4:30. Didn't see any other cameras. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to say, because my friend Chris was there filming for my channel that day, and he was on the Steam and Steel tour, and I thought, oh, it'd be interesting if, like, you guys were on the same tours at the same time or something like that. But your tour was at 4:30. What time did he go? I feel like his tour was at 4:30 as well. I swear you guys were on the same tour. I swear. That's interesting. But yeah, you know, I've always been very supportive of the reopening of the Queen Mary. You know, so many people just, you know, when the ship closed for the pandemic, so many people came out and were just spreading fake information, you know, because it was weird. They relished the idea that the ship was going to be scrapped or sunk or whatever. They were laughing and practically opening bottles of champagne over it. I'm like, that is such a weird take to have, you know, like, so weird. Like, why would you celebrate that? That's like the weirdest thing ever. You know, I could, you know, so anyway, without going into a rant. So, you know, so immediately I was like, I have to do something, because there's so much negative information out there that when I researched and I actually pulled up documents and everything all the way back to 1992 about the maintenance of the ship, the current state of the ship, I even researched into the politics of having the ship in Long Beach to learn as much as I could, not just about the history, but about where it's at today, how it got there, and could it be saved? That was my biggest question at first. Can the Queen Mary be saved? And when I looked at all of it, I'm like, there. You know, I used to be a maintenance guy. I'm not an engineer, but I used to be a maintenance guy. I know what it's like to repair stuff. I know when something is beyond repair. I've seen stuff that is so corroded, it's just, you might as well throw it out. You know, and just from my experience, and you know, when reviewing everything about the Queen Mary, I said, you know, the ship looks worse than it really is. It's just a lot of aesthetic stuff that makes you think something is worse underneath. It's kind of like, you know, people were saying, oh, there's so much rust on the ship, inside the ship. The rust is on the surface, but like, there was proof that when you scraped it off, the metal underneath was still salvageable in a lot of places. Areas that were really, really badly corroded happened to be areas that didn't necessarily require immediate care. Like, I looked at it, I'm like, okay, that does look bad, but that is not going to make the ship collapse into itself. It's not that kind of danger. You know, there were some areas where, out of precaution, they closed it off. The bridge wings on the ship, you know, in the last couple years, they closed them off with walls, so you couldn't go out to the edge of the bridge wing because the bridge wing was starting to corrode, but there was no proof yet that someone would fall through it and die, you know. So, but they closed it off out of precaution. And so, but I look at the bridge wings, I'm like, you know, they look a bit rusty, but you know, scrape that off, you know, do some reinforcement, and you're good. It's fine, you know. So when I looked at the ship, I was kind of like, okay, there's a lot of stuff on the surface that might look concerning, but when the surveyors have gone and dug under the surface and looked at how things are, the ship was in really good shape. The hull is covered in barnacles and algae, but, you know, when they inspected it, you know, they found that the hull was still, you know, they had divers go all underneath, all through the bottom of the hull, all down the length of the ship. Something like 45 different designated zones were checked, because they were zones that were like the most likely to have corrosion, and they checked all 45 zones, and ultrasounded them, found that the metal plates were still at least an inch thick when they were originally manufactured, an inch and a quarter or an inch and a half. So there was up to a half inch of corrosion, but there was still a significant amount. You know, a lot of cruise ships have a half to 3/4 inch thick steel plating, and the Queen Mary's 90-some-odd-year-old plating is still thicker than that. You know, so there was a lot of stuff I looked at. I'm like, you know, it's in really good condition. And eventually the city of Long Beach hired the Elliott Design Group, which are marine surveyors for ships, and they went and just dug through the ship to come up with one giant portfolio of, okay, here's all the stuff that you should probably tackle. And I looked through that, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, there's a lot of aesthetic stuff, but generally the consensus of the portfolio was the ship is 100% salvageable. There's nothing to indicate that the ship should be scrapped. And the city of Long Beach agreed. And that was the biggest moment where I was kind of like, it's, you know, the ship will live. It'll be fine. So, yeah. Whew. All right. Soapbox over. Moonzer says, what is the video of Queen Elizabeth corridors called? Well, they've done it twice. I think in one video it was part of the Cunard promotional video called, is it on here? No. Called Getting There Is Half the Fun. And then there was another one done, like British Path was walking through the ship. I think it was like just before the final voyage across the Atlantic, and they did a walkthrough of the ship, and in like for like a second or two they showed the corridors. So yeah, there's that. Let's see here. Carter Asher says, do you like the Andy Griffith Show? I have seen a lot of the Andy Griffith Show, but it never caught my interest the way like I Love Lucy did, for instance. So I wouldn't say yes, but I'm not, you know, against it. We got some Star Trek nerds in the chat. Oh, gosh. So Cal says, we appreciate all the history that you produce here on YouTube for us, Alex. Thank you so much. Jackson James says, do you have a collection of ocean liner memorabilia? Absolutely. Is there a way that I could... There is. But it wouldn't look very good on that screen. Because I can't move that. I mean, I could move that camera that's looking at me and take it to the memorabilia. But trying to set the camera back up again would be kind of like a pain. No, I can't do it. I mean, I want to, but the thing is like, I don't know. Every time I set up these live streams, I have equipment everywhere. I have to move furniture everywhere just to set up all the equipment. And so it makes my apartment look like a cluttered mess, which it never is. I always keep my apartment sparkling clean, but it's cluttered because I have to move everything for the live streams. So I don't want people to like look at my apartment and be like, wow, that's what he lives in, you know? Like, I can't do it. Can't do it. But yes, I have a collection of ocean liner memorabilia. I suppose I could, well, maybe I could pull one or two things. But then if I try to show it to the camera, you guys wouldn't be able to see it very well. Because there's no light on it. Sorry, I can't do it. I can't do it. But if you're a member of my channel, I have a video that talks about the memorabilia I have. It's called like these are a few of my favorite things. That's literally the title of the video. These are a few of my favorite things. Yeah, so I have stuff. So like one of the oldest things I have, the ocean liner memorabilia, is I have a postcard of RMS Mauretania that was dated 1911, and it was stamped. It was stamped. Well, I mean, it was given a King George the Fifth. No. Yes, it was given a King George. No. Yes, I'm sorry. Why am I getting confused? It was given a King George V stamp because in 1911 he had just become king, and it was given a King George V stamp. It was processed, so it had an extra stamping over it because it was processed through the Royal Mail. And there is an inscription on the back. It's a message to somebody. I discovered that it's half Polish, half English, the writing. So I've tried to translate it. I can't translate it because it's literally like you've ever heard of Yiddish? It's like basically like half, Hebrew, half like English, and they just call it Yiddish, right? I think that's the best description I've ever been told of Yiddish, but it's kind of like that. It's like half Polish, half English, and so when you try to translate it, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. The meaning changes every time you look at a definition of the different words and stuff. And so I don't know what it says, unfortunately. But yeah, but what's interesting about that picture, I'll just go pull it for you guys, but I'll tell you first, what's interesting about the postcard is that it was hand-painted, or maybe it was actually silk-screened to paint it, silk-screened. And back then, to silk-screen stuff, if you had like whites and blues, it would most likely be infused with lead. And if you had reds and greens, it was most likely infused with with arsenic, which is radioactive. So this postcard very likely contains traces of lead and arsenic. And it's covered in a plastic cover, so I don't touch it. I rarely ever go to pick up the postcard just out of a hint of safety. But I will go get it right now, and I'll show it to you. When you see it, the first thing you will notice is... I'll just tell you. Be right back. Turn the microphone around. Okay, so I'm going to try to hold this up so you can see it. Yeah, see, it's really dark because I don't have a light on over here, but it's the RMS Mauretania. Well, I mean, the postcard is called RMS Mauretania, but the thing is that it is actually a photograph of Lusitania, but because Mauretania... Yeah, how do I say this? They were advertising Mauretania using a Lusitania photo, and the photo was, like I said, silk screened to give it color, and it's in a plastic protective case, so you probably can't see it, but if I turn it over, you know, it's signed and everything. I know that the first words of the message is Dear Arthur. So I do know it says that, Dear Arthur. And then the last words are be good. Be good. And it is assigns to an address in Utica, New York. I've tried looking that up. I'm not sure if that's a real place, but I don't know. And then there's a stamping that says Cardiff. And then you can see in the corner, the red stamp there is the King George V 1 penny stamp. So yeah, pretty neat. And yeah, it is. Let me see what the date is. The date is March 20th, 1911. March 20th, 1911. This is one of my most prized possessions and one of the oldest pieces of memorabilia I have. I'll go grab another one. Okay. So this is a not collectible. It's a commemorative ashtray that was sold on the RMS Queen Mary starting in the 1930s and then continuing on into the 1950s and 60s. Now, it might be hard to see, but in the middle of the ashtray is a reverse painting of RMS Queen Mary. If you don't know what a reverse painting is, it's where there's a piece of glass here. I can touch it because it's just straight glass. But in order to put the image on there, they have to paint the reverse side of the glass, which part of what makes it so cool is if you have little details like the name, RMS Queen Mary on the bow, the name must be painted backwards first, and then the white of the hull painted behind it. So it's that kind of layering you have to do with this. Now, they sell a lot of these on eBay, but a lot of them are not taken care of. A lot of them do not date back to the 1930s. They date back to like the 1950s. And a lot of them are damaged because, well, first of all, you see the blue, the shimmering blue in the background? That is blue butterfly wings. I'm not kidding. They're real butterfly wings. They use that because, you know, it was considered very beautiful, very pretty, and it is. You can see how it shimmers. I like that. And yeah, but the thing is people have actually used these ashtrays and damaged the butterfly wings and the painting behind it. Mine is completely undamaged. It dates back, I think, to the late 1930s. It was made in England. It's made of chromed steel, so it is chromed. And yeah, this is one of my other prized possessions, and it's just a little ashtray that was sold on the RMS Queen Mary. So yeah. So that is just a few of the memorabilia I have. I have a replica Titanic first class dessert plate. I have a replica of that. I have, do I have it here? Yeah, well, this is a little cake plate from the RMS Queen Mary. This itself is Foley bone china, but for, I think, like second class, they did not use Foley. They used Maddock ivory ware, which is the same type as this plate here. It's a bit thicker. It's more robust. It's still china, but it's not bone china. And I have a version of this cake plate in the Maddock ivory ware that is for kosher food. So it has an inscription in the center of it in English and Hebrew, and it says meat on the plate. Now, what's funny is the plates either say meat or milk on them. And to this day, I don't know whether that means only meat or milk products could be used on those specific plates, which is weird because you have like a coffee mug that says milk in it. You can have plates that say milk. You can have plates that say meat. So I'm like, what does it mean? Why? Why is that there? And I haven't been able to get a straight answer. So if anybody is kosher, or practicing, that's not the right word, right? If anybody practices eating kosher and you know about this kind of stuff, please let me know. I have never been able to get the right answer. Why do all the dishware say either meat or milk, regardless if they're a cake plate? So I want to know. I really want to know. But yeah, so I have that, and that's literally the first piece of the tea set I ever bought, and I don't use it. It's on my shelf back there. It's not part of my tea set because even though I wanted to use it as a cake plate, it didn't feel right. I'm not Jewish, and it probably should be used for the proper purpose. So instead, I have it on display, and I bought a separate cake plate that I could use for my tea set. So I have a bunch of stuff like that. I have like race cards. One of the coolest things I have too is a menu. It's a second class menu. It's tourist menu dating back to August 3rd. No, 30th. Sorry, August 30th, 1939. The final peacetime voyage of the RMS Queen Mary before war happened. Just a few days, because it was dated August 30th, was the day that the ship left Southampton. And just a few days later, on September 2nd, the UK would declare war on Germany. And so it was that very voyage that the menu is from. And it's from second class, tourist class. Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, so I have a bunch of stuff like that, and I want to expand the ocean liner memorabilia I have. I have a model of the Titanic that I built myself in 2012. I have a large photograph of the RMS Queen Mary, the whole, like all the insides, like it's a cutaway photograph, so you can see all the insides of the Queen Mary, all the decks, all the levels. That's another thing I have. So, I had a shelf built. Here's a kind of a cool coincidence. I had all this Queen Mary memorabilia, and I wanted to put it on its own shelf. I thought it'd be so cool if I had a special shelf that looks like it's something from the Queen Mary. And I just thought, I'll just give it like this Art Deco look. I kind of thought in my head, what was the color of the wood on the Queen Mary? A lot of it was this very gold brown, and I thought, okay, it's got to be Art Deco. It's going to have this interesting shape. And I designed it, and I told my friend Steve R., I told him, I'm like, can you build this for me? He says, absolutely. So he built me the shelf, all the Art Deco design on it and everything. All my memorabilia sits on it. And then I show it to Steve Ablonsi, Blue Ribbon, in the chat. And he goes, oh, wow, you designed it to look like the builder's plate on the Queen Mary. And I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, that is the same shape as the builder's plate on the Queen Mary. And I didn't know. I'd never seen the builder's plate up until that point. So he showed me a picture of the builder's plate. And my shelf unit with the back plate and everything designed to fit on the wall is all shaped like the builder's plate of the Queen Mary. That is one of the biggest coincidences, because I did not see the builder's plate on the Queen Mary. It's located on the forward superstructure high up over your head. I did not even go to that area where it's at. And I'd never seen a photograph of it up until that point, and so that was weird. I automatically designed the builder's plate shape, and I didn't even realize it. Weird. Let's see, yeah. So I better get back to questions and comments. Oh, I see. Is it Zelger? Yeah. I'll call you Mr. Zantastico, because I can say that easier. Haven't been commenting for a while, sorry, but I've been busy with school. That's alright, no problem. Reliant says, pity Olympic was never made into a hotel. I agree. I wish Olympic had been made into a hotel. Alright, let's see. Trying to get through some comments to get all the way to the... It's 5:34 p.m. I just looked at the time because I was like, what time is it? It's 5:34 p.m. Keep note, all you people who know about Queen Mary coincidences. Jose asks, hello, Alex. I wanted to ask you to answer a question that I have been having for a long time. How was the separation of classes respected or made to be respected on transatlantic ships? A lot of transatlantic ships often had waist-high gates that prevented people from going from one area of the ship to another based off of class. So let's say there's a corridor, right? Even Titanic had this. There would have been a gate that was about waist high that prevented you from going from third class to second class, let's say. Or the area would have been separated through a door, and the door would have been kept shut, and there would have been stewards to prevent you from going through the door. Same thing with the gate. There would have been stewards standing nearby that would have they would have said, excuse me, sir, you can't go through here, kind of thing. That kind of stuff. I know the movie Titanic shows that there were these huge gates that prevented people from getting out. It wasn't like that on Titanic. They had short little waist-high gates that you could climb over, but the idea was that if you climbed over, then, the Master-at-Arms was going to arrest you. So you just didn't climb over, that's how they did it. And, even on Queen Mary, it was like that. What's interesting is along the B deck forward first class corridors, there were a few staterooms that were designed to be usable as either first class cabins, or depending on how many people were on the voyage and what the ratio was, it could be converted to third class cabins. And one of those rooms is now considered room B340 on the Queen Mary, the famous haunted room. But that used to be 2 or 3 essentially third-class cabins, but they could be converted into suites for first-class passengers. And the way that they prevented those people from... Because they couldn't install a permanent gate, because sometimes you need passengers to be able to go through the area. So what they did was... They had a giant moving nicely done wooden grate that could be hooked into the walls of the hallway, and they had special holes, like brass holes in the halls, that allowed you to move the metal grate, certain distances to allow certain cabins to be available and certain cabins to be closed off for either third or first class. Interesting little thing about that. And then another thing people don't know is that after the Second World War, you see, third class on Queen Mary did not have their own swimming pool. There was a first class swimming pool and a second class swimming pool. So to make being in third class a bit more appealing for passengers on the Queen Mary, they allotted them certain times of the day where third class passengers could swim in the first class pool. And then what would happen is after the third-class passengers swam, they would empty the pool, filter the water, clean the room, and then prepare it for first-class passengers. And then it would kind of go back and forth like that throughout the day. And that's how they did it. Yeah. Jose says, could a second-class passenger in his best clothes go to a first-class restaurant or cafe without getting caught? How did it work? They could not. And the reason why is because even if they dressed really nicely, again, there were stewards that were stationed at the various gateways that led from second class to first class. And you would have to present some kind of identification, either your ticket or you had to be able to present them with your cabin number, so that way they could, they could, what do you call it? They could confirm who you are and stuff like that. Now, there were a few cases of stowaways on the ship who ended up eating, and like there was one guy who was eating food in first class at the main lounge because he wasn't allowed to eat at the restaurants, because at the restaurants they do confirm your identification. So what he did was he went to the afternoon tea served in the main lounge on promenade deck, and he would just stuff his face full of pastries. And it's kind of funny because one of the stewards saw him do that, and the steward thought he was a piggish fellow. That's the words he used, a piggish fellow. But it just so happened that the stowaway happened to tell one of the first class ladies, by the way, like, I'm a stowaway, and can you believe I'm here? And immediately she reported him to the officers, and he was taken to the isolation wards for the rest of the voyage. Actually, he was asked if he could... am I confusing him with somebody else? I think he was asked, like, okay, you could either be arrested when you get to shore, or you could work off your voyage by working. And I think, if I'm remembering the right guy, I think he chose to work off his voyage. So he worked as a dish cleaner, dishwasher, and according to him, he was perfectly happy with that. So I guess it's better than going to jail, right? So yeah, pretty cool. Okay, Zantastico says, hey Alex, have a question for you. Do you think if the Britannic had survived, would it have the biggest ship in the world award, or will it just be overtaken by the Imperator? It would have been overtaken by a larger ship. I don't know personally if Imperator was larger. I don't know enough to be able to say. But eventually it would have been overtaken by a larger ship. Like Normandy. It's like the easiest ship I know off the top of my head. It would have been overtaken by a larger ship for sure. But I don't know enough about the history of Britannic to be able to accurately answer your question. But I hope I did. Carter Asher says, is the Queen Mary the SS Poseidon? The SS Poseidon from the book and the movies, Poseidon Adventure, is a fictional ship, but it is highly based off of the RMS Queen Mary, because Paul Gallico, the author, was a passenger aboard the ship when the ship got struck by a rogue wave. Obviously, the ship survived it, but it was such an interesting ordeal that he was inspired to write a story based off of, like, what if the ship had flipped over and capsized. So, yeah. So it is highly based off of Queen Mary, and when they filmed the 1972 movie, all the models of the ship were designed to look like the Queen Mary, and the exterior shots that were like filmed on promenade decks and stuff like that were filmed on the Queen Mary, but interior shots were not filmed on the Queen Mary. Dino says, any information about how bookings are going for the Queen Mary Hotel? I don't know how the bookings are going for the rooms, but what I do know is that tours are selling like hotcakes. They are going fast. People are buying up tours like crazy. So I think it's going really well. I think there is a hint that this is going to be big. Like, there is that weird inkling, like, I think when the ship fully reopens, it might be really popular. Really popular. Because I think part of it isn't just that, like a bunch of, YouTubers like me were making videos on it and trying to encourage people to appreciate the ship, but it's also the fact that when you lose something, you don't quite realize what you had until you lost it. And when the Queen Mary was closed for 3 years, people, mainly Americans, who heard about it just kind of realized, like, wow, I've never experienced that, or wow, I should have been there more often, or something. And so I think that's what it is. It's kind of like people are like, all right, well, it's back. Let's take the opportunity to see it. And I know a lot of people who've watched my channel over the past couple years watching Queen Mary videos. And they're like, hi, I'm from Australia. Hi, I'm from New Zealand. Hi, I'm from, South Africa or whatever. And they're like, we've heard about the Queen Mary, kind of. We've never been interested, but now we are. Now we want to visit California to see the Queen Mary. And there's been a lot of comments like that, and I think it's really helped boost the popularity of the Queen Mary. I already know a lot of families who have started planning the early processes of coming to California for a visit and making a stop at the Queen Mary. Pretty cool. But yeah, the tours are selling like hotcakes. Sarah says, found your channel a few months ago, love the content. Thank you so much, Sarah. Santasco says, absolutely love the poster of Cunard. Where did you get it? So this one, they sell this on eBay. It's a copy of a Cunard poster. And this is smaller than the original Cunard poster would have been. The original was like huge. But this is a smaller copy. And I got it off eBay. I think it cost me $18. I think $18, and then I had to buy the frame for it. But yeah, $18. I think it's a good quality copy. Yeah, it's pretty good, and it's a nice small size, so it fits in a small space like a kitchen or whatever. So it's pretty cool, and it's one of my favorites because it shows both the Queen Elizabeth and the Queen Mary. Queen Elizabeth is in Southampton, next to the old Art Deco Cunard terminal. And then the Queen Mary is in New York, about to pull into Pier 90. So, pretty cool. Pretty cool. Carter says, Alex, Queen Mary 2. Alex in Seaside of Bulgaria. Your question about Titanic and presentations, I'm not sure I'm following. I'm not understanding. But you're saying what's my opinion on Titanic? I don't know. I prefer not to talk about Titanic on my channel. I'll be totally honest. I prefer not to do it. But Carter Asher says, Alex, Queen Mary 2 and Queen Elizabeth from 2010 is the same as in the past. I don't know what you mean. They're not the same ships, if that's what you're asking. Conrad says, Alex, have you visited the space shuttle? No, I actually haven't. I haven't had the ability to do that. But I am quite interested in a few space museums. I've seen like rockets and stuff like that. Like they especially have it at the Evergreen Museum here in Oregon. They have a whole building dedicated to space stuff. And they have this giant rocket in there that is huge. It goes like 5 stories below ground level, and then extends all the way, like, I don't know, I think it's 6 stories above the ground. It's huge, and it was awesome. It was awesome. But yeah, but no space shuttle there. No space shuttle. Ozzy says, have a Texas Long Island iced tea. No thanks. No thanks. Too alcoholic. Tyler says, just ordered a book on Laconia. Interesting. Hope you enjoy it. It is an interesting story, the Laconia. Dangerous Brian. I think what happened on 9/11 was way bigger than JFK. Way bigger. I don't think there was a comparison. There's no comparison. It's just huge. Alex C. Set Up Bulgaria says, do you think of yourself as a Queen Mary expert / historian? No, I don't. I'm still learning a lot about the Queen Mary. You know, my friend Steve I have him on my channel to help me do those live stream lectures because he knows way more about it. He's got connections to people that know way more about it. I know a lot about Queen Mary. There are some people who I know would say, oh yeah, Alex has learned a lot in the last 2 years, just completely consumed in Queen Mary stuff. But nevertheless, there are people out there that I know personally who know 10 times as much as I do. And they know some of the coolest things. And I would love to get them in like a vlog or something, just walking through the Queen Mary with me and pointing stuff out. Because it would be the coolest videos you guys ever saw. The stuff that they know is just so much detail. The tiniest little things, you know, that they know. It's so cool. So, but yeah, I don't consider myself an expert, and they don't consider themselves experts either, because they're also still learning stuff. But that being said, I would say that if there is a historic expertise that I may have, then there are two things. Disneyland, I do consider that one of my greatest historic expertise level of knowledge, though I am not an expert at that either, but it is certainly the thing I'm most knowledgeable about. And then right up next to it, Queen Mary. That is the next thing I'm most knowledgeable about. And then after that come things like trains, other ships, you know, just everything. I have kind of, you know, when it comes to my interests, it doesn't just end at steam and history. Like, I have a toe in like every interest, you know, there could be in this world. My mind is always curious about the world. I'm always asking questions. I'm always interested. Like, somebody once told me that they're like, oh, you'll think I'm boring because I really like the, you know, like discussing geopolitical topics or whatever. I'm like, okay, I'm not at all knowledgeable about geopolitical topics, but I can hold a conversation with them and they teach me something new and I'm fascinated about it, even though I'd probably never pick up a book and read about it. I'm just that way. I just have a curious mind. I always have to ask questions. I always have to know. So, and it's funny because some people ask me, they're like, you know, what do you do in your free time? And I go, honestly, people who know me would just say, oh, Alex, you know, when he has free time available, he watches videos. But I don't just watch videos. I watch videos to learn things. Every day I try to learn something new about the world. And it could be anything at all. And that's just because, I mean, it's not even a goal. I don't like wake up going, what am I going to learn today? No, it's just more like I'm so curious about the planet, about the world, about history, about nature, about science, about, you know, psychology and sociology. Every interest that there could be, I have a little bit of interest in it. And so, yeah, I always have to know something. So that's just me. Evan says, when are you seeing the Queen Mary, Alex? Well, I wanted to go this year. I was actually saving up a good chunk of money to go visit the Queen Mary. I was going to do it in May when the hotel rooms reopened. But the thing is that I have a more important task than that, believe it or not. My UK trip does take precedence. I really want to go, and I could make a lot of videos on my UK trip, and so I have decided that instead of spending a huge chunk of money to go down to Southern California to visit the Queen Mary, I am instead just going to use that chunk of money to contribute towards my UK trip, so that way I can go just, you know, as soon as I can. So unfortunately, that's it. I will see if there's a possibility that on my way to New York, I might stop off at LA and stay at the Queen Mary and visit the ship. That is a possibility, but it is a very expensive possibility. So, but I do want to go back. You know, my friend Chris filmed all this footage for me, and I was reviewing it with him yesterday, And I told him, I was like, I miss the Queen Mary so bad. I watched all the stuff he got to see and walk through, and I just kept thinking, I wish I could have, like, touched that wall, or, you know, or, like, you know, like, smelled, you know, that book or something. Just, like, you know, like, I wish I could be there. I wish I could be there. So, yeah. Ken says, my car club did a meet and drive last Sunday, and we ended up at the Evergreen Museum. It was unexpected, so cool to see the Spruce Goose. Oh, I have to agree. I mean, first time I went there, I knew it was big. Everyone told me, Alex, that is like the biggest airplane you've ever seen. I said, okay. Yeah, I had an idea. And then when I got there, I felt like an ant. I felt like a little ant in comparison. I was just like, oh my god, this is the biggest flying thing I've ever seen. It was really cool. It just really just puts you in awe. Carter Asher says, Alex, what date did you go to the Queen Mary? Last time I was at the Queen Mary was January 12th, I think it was, 2020. Brian says, the tea set you're using is ocean liner memorabilia from different Cunard ships. That is true. That is true. When someone asked me what memorabilia I had, I forgot to mention that the tea set is memorabilia from Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, and possibly other ships like, you know, like Sylvania or something. Chilling says, Alex, painting the Queen Mary, do you know why the painted surfaces weren't scraped down to the bare metal? I've done similar work, and going to bare metal resulted in the paint lasting longer. I might need more context to your question, because if you're asking about when the ship was in service, that's one thing. If you're asking about while the ship is in Long Beach, that's another thing. So I would probably need more context. Otherwise, I'd be explaining two different halves of a story. Conrad says, I'm not kosher, but plates could either be used for meat or cheese. Never interchangeable, of course. Coffee with cream. And yeah, but I think more my question about the plate that says meat on it is, what if you need... Because I know they part of being kosher is not combining your food into one plate. So there would have been several plates, but there was only meat and milk plates. So which plate do you use for your broccoli? Do you use the meat plate or do you use the milk plate? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm so curious. I'm so curious. So yeah, if anybody here is Jewish and you're kosher and you've seen plates that are labeled, and especially if the whole plate set only says meat and milk, but you know what they're used for, let me know, because I want to know, where do you put your broccoli? You know, where do you put the gravy for, you know, for your roast, you know, beef, if you're having roast beef or something. So, like, where do you put it? You know. Do they... Yeah, they have gravy with it. Yeah, they have gravy. There were soup bowls. Some soup bowls said milk, some soup bowls said meat. You know, but if you're having broth, is that meat? What if it's just vegetable broth? You know, I mean... How does it work? Yeah. But it is interesting. Very interesting. Carter says, are you going to see Titanic 2? The movie? No. No, I don't watch stuff like that. Jose says, thanks very much, Alex. Your answer was really clear. So clear that even me that didn't understand and speak English perfectly, because that's not my born language, it was really understandable. Thanks. You're welcome, Jose. Wyatt says, hi, Alex. If the Queen Mary was hypothetically open for long-term living, like some hotels throughout the U.S., would you consider taking up residence on the ship? Yes, I think I would. I hope it doesn't, though. That's the thing, is I hope it doesn't, because the thing is that, like, if they open the Queen Mary up for permanent, like, housing inside, people don't take care of their houses. Their cats, you know, pee holes into the walls, you know. Their dogs scratch up the floors or break windows. I mean, a dog could not break a porthole on the ship. It just wouldn't happen. A human can barely break a porthole on the ship. But I suppose my biggest concern will be fire. You know, people. I know somebody who lights candles, tons of candles all at once, because they like candles a lot. And sometimes they leave the candles going, and I'm like, one day you're going to set your house on fire because you're not taking care of your candles. You know, so it's things like that. And I've seen people actually accidentally set their apartments on fire. I lived in Southern California, and at one point I was living in one apartment complex. In the apartment complex over, you could see the upper windows of the apartments. And one day I'm outside in the alley talking with a friend, you know, and I can see in the corner of my eye that, you know, there were people who were in their dining room and they had lit some candles, and I even saw them, like, walking around with, like, sage. You know, they're probably Catholic, so very, very Catholic. So I don't think they were, like, doing anything like a, you know, like what do you call it, exorcism or anything like that. I think they were just very, very Catholic, and they were just, you know. But I saw them, and then they went away from the dining room, and just minutes later, there's this fire erupting in the dining room. And they didn't know. And, like, me and my friend ran over to the next apartment complex, went up to their apartment, because we kind of, like, judged how many windows over it was, where the front door should be, pounded on the door, and told them that, you know, their dining room was on fire. And they were like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, you know, like, they were able to put it out, thankfully. I had a roommate who was still at my apartment see from their window that they came over with a big blanket and put out the fire. But that's what happens. Like, and I'm afraid that people being irresponsible. I mean, have you seen those cooking videos on YouTube where someone is like, oh, I've never cooked before, but I'm going to make a steak. And then they put oil in a pan, leave it on the stove until it bursts into flames, and then they try to spray it with water to put out the flames, and that creates an explosion. You know, so people light their houses on fire. You know, dogs go up to the stoves in the kitchen, and they're trying to reach for food or something that's left on the stove, and then they accidentally turn on the gas flame, and the flame goes up, lights everything on fire. So my biggest fear is that people's neglectfulness will light the ship on fire. And while the ship is made of steel, there is a significant amount of wood on board. Granted, the wood is sandwiched in between layers of asbestos, so that way it doesn't burn too quickly. Nevertheless, I worry about that stuff. You know, the RMS Queen Elizabeth caught fire and burned completely. Just it was not salvageable, and so I worry about that for the Queen Mary if it was ever converted for use as a permanent living. But at the same time, it's not something to be worried about. I highly doubt Long Beach would ever use it for that, because they know the dangers of fire on old ocean liners. The Queen Mary is very fire resistant. Very, very fire resistant. But not perfect. So, yeah. Just a little thought for you. Ron says, checked on room prices for Queen Mary. June on Monday through Wednesday. Some dates were booked. Yeah, I think the things are slowly... I think once I post my video update about the Queen Mary and I tell the wide general audience, because I get like 50, 55, sometimes 100,000 views on an update video. And I bet once I put up an update video that has that information, people will start booking it like crazy. Because a lot of people still don't know the ship is about to reopen. Jeffrey says, Alex, are you aware that there are people making copycat videos of your videos? I saw someone pretty much copying your caboose video. Really? Oh, that's interesting. I know that some people do copy. Yeah, I do know. That some people do it because, like, I know someone who's done a few copycat videos, but that's because they really like my channel and they really want to do something, but, you know, they still haven't found the groove of how to do their own thing yet. And then there's some people who copy because they're like, you know, I'm going to try to get the same fame and popularity. I found one person who was in, YouTube alerted me of somebody who lived in the Philippines who literally took my footage of Disneyland and then, like, it was like vlogs and stuff, and then they like overlaid really loud music over it and then reposted it 100% fully my video, reposted it on YouTube because they just wanted that popularity. It was loud music. Like, it's one thing if you're gonna like cut out my audio and try to convert it to like a Filipino language. That's one thing. I'd kind of be like, all right, if this person wants to take what I did and translate it, because they know I'm not going to do it. Like, I'm sorry, folks. I cannot translate my videos to other languages. I've looked into it. It can't be done on an easy basis. But if there was someone who was like, Alex, I really like your videos, but I think someone from my country who does not speak English at all would really love to see it, I would kind of work something out with them and be like, okay, well, here's how we can get that done and it can be part of your thing. That would be cool. But this person did not even do that. They just took my whole video, overplayed loud music on it, and then like posted it as their own, and I made them take it down. So, so I do know that there are copycats out there. But yeah, Dirtby says, opinions on the separate bridge island designs of older steamers like the Big Four, the RMS Cynthia, etc. Yeah, I know what you mean. The separate bridge island. I don't like it that much. I really like the look that ocean liners got in the 20th century, where the whole superstructure was part of one thing. I like that most. But nevertheless, there were some pretty beautiful ships that had that. You know, like Oceanic of 1899 had that beautiful ship. Mauretania had a separate second-class area towards the stern that was separated from the superstructure of the first class. And that does kind of bother me when I look at it, but all in all, I still think Mauretania is beautiful. So I think that's kind of my thoughts on it. I think sometimes it does bother me, but sometimes the ship is just so beautiful I can kind of overlook it. Hey Alex, I'm planning to change my username because I think, no offense, you can't pronounce it well. I cannot. Zeljanri. Zeljanri. No, so I think it's like Zeljanri, like a zh, and I can't do it. I'm sorry, I can't do it. Chris says, hey Alex, one of my favorite artworks of RMS Titanic is Gordon Bowen's of GB Maritime Art RMS Titanic, A Day to Remember. It shows what RMS Titanic looked like during sea trials. Interesting. Oh wow. That's pretty neat. Alex says, which do you think was the ocean liner which helped the most with saving lives from other ocean liners? And you're asking right off the top of my head. Off the top of my head, the only one that I really know anything about when it comes to that specific thing would be Carpathia. Yeah, Carpathia during the incident of Titanic sinking. But I know there are others. I know that there has to be others that rescued other passengers from other ocean liners. And there probably were worse disasters, maybe. But helped the most. I can't help but feel like when it comes to ocean liners, with another ocean liner assisting a sinking ocean liner, Carpathia has to be the top one. I think it has to be. I don't know. I just don't know enough. Carter Asher says, why did they call the Queen Mary and Queen Mary 2 and Queen Elizabeth 1938 and Queen Elizabeth 2010? If I understand your question correctly, you're wondering why did they make a Queen Mary 2 instead of just naming it a whole new name. I think what they wanted to do was they wanted to create another ocean liner to replace the QE2. And they thought, it's an ocean liner. It's classic already because it's an ocean liner. At the time there was only like a few left in service, but they were all in service as cruise ships aside from the QE2. So Cunard was like, well, we got to take something from our past, and so the two greatest ocean liners of Cunard's past are Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth. So they decided that the next ocean liner would be called Queen Mary 2, and they called it 2, and that's an interesting one because they've never officially named a Cunard ship with the numerical 2, right? So if they ever renamed a ship, there was a Mauretania that we call Mauretania 2, but it wasn't literally named Mauretania 2, it was just named Mauretania, and it was 1938 was when it was launched. So the Mauretania of 1938 was just Mauretania, named after the original Mauretania ship. And so, but the thing is, when QE2 came around, it was going to be named after the Queen Elizabeth ship, launched 1938. And as with tradition, the QE2 was just going to be named Queen Elizabeth, right? And the ship was going to be named after the original ship. So if you don't believe me, just think about how Cunard does things. Mauretania was not Mauretania 2, it was Mauretania, named after the ship Mauretania, right? So the second Queen Elizabeth ship was not named after Queen Elizabeth II, the woman. It was named after the original Queen Elizabeth ship, and it was just going to be Queen Elizabeth of 1969. But then Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, when she went to name the ship, she named it Queen Elizabeth II. Some people say that was on purpose, some people say it was by accident. I think Her Majesty did make a few accidents in her speeches in her life. She may have been the queen, but she was still human. And so Cunard, to spare her humiliation, I mean, it's not big humiliation, but to spare her humiliation, said, no, we did name the ship Queen Elizabeth II. But when Her Majesty named the ship, she said, I named this ship Queen Elizabeth II. Cunard said, we can't name the ship II. It doesn't make sense to the chronology of our ships. So they said, how do we fix this? And what they did was they said, we'll put a numerical 2, indicating that it's not Queen Elizabeth II, it's the second ship called Queen Elizabeth. So that is why QE2 has the name Queen Elizabeth II, not Queen Elizabeth II. Very important to make that distinction. So the QE2 was named after the original Queen Elizabeth. And then when they came and made the Queen Elizabeth cruise ship, which the one that's out there today, I think you said 2010, it's not an ocean liner, it's a cruise ship. And when they named that, they decided to name it after the original Queen Elizabeth ship. So instead of putting like Queen Elizabeth III or something on there, they just decided to call it Queen Elizabeth. And so that's how you get that. And Queen Mary 2 was named with a numerical 2 because it's the second ship named after Queen Mary, the original ship. It's interesting. It's interesting how they do that. But I've seen so many people go, "Oh, have you seen the ship, MV Queen Elizabeth II?" I'm like, it's not the second, it's two. Just a little something for you, yeah. Little rant. All right. So Shibert says, "Hi Alex, what's your favorite biscuit to have with your tea?" It would have to be. Well, this would be the second runner-up, but I really, really, really like fresh Scottish shortbread. While it's still nice and soft, it does after like a day start to harden up, and it becomes a little bit crunchy, a little bit crumbly. But I like it when it's like fresh out of the oven and it's still soft. That's my favorite. If I have it with tea right then and there, heaven, absolute heaven. So that's my favorite. Years of Sea says, "How many voyages did the Queen Mary complete during her sea trials in 1936? I believe there were 3 days of sea trials. How many voyages? I mean, technically they would bring it out and then just take it around for several times. So I guess technically 1 voyage per day, 3 days, 3 voyages. But yeah, lots of testing with sea trials. And the ship performed a lot better during sea trials than they thought it would. Honestly, they were pretty impressed with the performance of the Queen Mary when they brought her out. So, Conrad says, "I don't know about broccoli, but maybe customarily it would end up always on a certain one. Soup broth I can see being meat-based. And cream-based soups would use milk bowls." That's true. Cream-based soups would use the milk bowls. So yeah, I guess they would just have to make a good judgment as to like what you're having would be on a certain plate. Like if you're having a salad, then maybe it would be on a meat plate. But if you're having a salad with a milk-based dressing, maybe it would be on a milk plate. That's interesting. Chilling in the Frozen North says, "I was asking, with respect or reference to you mentioning seeing maintenance work done on the Queen Mary earlier in this session." Okay, let me go back to your original comment and then kind of reread it. Oh, okay, I see. So why wasn't it scraped down to the bare metal in Long Beach? I think you're asking. Earlier in the session. So the paint was there were certain areas of the ship that I have seen over the last couple days where they have scraped it down to the metal. Particularly, they repainted the forward superstructure. So a lot of people saw over the past 3 years that the forward superstructure was peeling like crazy. And so they recently repainted the forward superstructure by scraping it down to bare metal, applying a primer, and then putting new paint on it, and which is the proper way of doing it. But the reason why in like 3 decades ago, for instance, they didn't do that was money. They were trying to save a lot of money on repainting the ship, so they just would paint over the problem, which everybody knows doesn't work very well. But yeah, what I am very happy about seeing at Long Beach is right now the Queen Mary is being properly repainted. Everywhere I've seen them paint, I've seen them scrape it off first, which is pretty cool. Yeah. So it's really nice. My biggest concern was the davits, because the davits looked so peeled. Some of them were just gray from just the bare steel, and some of them were red from developing rust since the steel had been exposed for, several months. But they scraped it down, sanded the rust down, got it back down to its steel color, and then they primed it and painted it. And now most of the davits are fully repainted and more are on the way. And then they're also working on doing more superstructure repainting. They started with areas that visitors would see up close. So if you're walking onto the port side promenade deck, you're going to see the side shell of the portside promenade deck, and that needed to be repainted first. They were going to repaint the starboard side later when they could afford to move people to the other side of the ship. But yeah, a lot of stuff on port side was painted first, since it was immediately in view of the people coming to the ship. But one of the things that's going to be happening soon is they will be scraping down the paint of the aft funnel all the way down to the stainless steel, and then repainting the aft funnel, because everybody knows right now the aft funnel is horribly peeling. When they painted it a couple of years back, there was a terrible heat wave, and they were in a rush for time to finish the aft funnel, so they painted the funnel despite the terrible heat wave. And what happened was the paint slowly just bubbled and chipped off over the years because it just wasn't properly applied to the funnel. So they're going to be fixing that soon, which is just really neat. I think Long Beach, they're doing such a great job. They're doing better than I thought they were going to be doing. I expected a certain amount of work to be done, and I thought, all right, there's a certain amount of work to be done. But they're going above that. They're going above my expectation, which I was so happy. I was almost brought to tears looking at, Chris's footage when he shot it for me. I said, "Oh my gosh, they did that! Oh my gosh, they did that!" And I was like, "Oh wow, they're fixing that." It was like I was a kid at a candy store looking at all the stuff that Long Beach was doing, and there was this big fear over the last 3 years that there was a fear that Long Beach didn't care. Long Beach was just gonna spruce up the ship enough to make it look like they care. But from what I've seen, no. This is more than just, slapping a coat of paint on. There is a lot of stuff going on the ship right now to restore the interiors. It is being done with actual love, which is good because, Steve and I, we both talked directly to the city manager, Tom Modica. We've spoken to the head of the Public Works Department. Public Works is the one that's repairing the ship. That was off the top of my head, his name escapes me, but we spoke to him. We spoke to Johnny Vallejo, who was at the time the managing director. We spoke to them personally. And, I wanted to see, when I spoke to them, is this just their job, or do they care? Or are they just city people who are supposed to care? But when I spoke to them, they really did care. They really, really did. They just found something about the ship that I found. Just something fascinating, something of life. And they thought, this is going to be so cool. They were happy to do it. Johnny Vallejo even described it as he's like, oh, my job with the city is my job. But he goes, but when I'm asked to go to the Queen Mary to check on progress, he gets so excited. It's the fun part of his job. And so, I was like, that's good. That makes me so happy. I kind of wish that city officials stopped calling Queen Mary the asset. But nevertheless, it is very comforting to see proof that they do care. That was my biggest concern, and they do. I think City of Long Beach does care a lot about the ship. So yeah, I'm very happy with how it's turning out, and there's so much more work to be done. They're starting work on new projects even, so it's not like they're finishing up projects. They're starting new ones now. The ship will be in a constant state of renovation for the foreseeable future, the next couple years. And then the city is currently deciding on where are we going to build a new dry dock. The city said we want to build a new dry dock that we can move the Queen Mary to for dry dock repairs. And then when the Queen Mary's not there, we can move cruise ships in there and make money off of that. So they're looking at building a dry dock. They're looking at all this stuff. Because not only will it help the Queen Mary, it will help the city earn more money. So they're really looking into all of this. I've never been so impressed by a city before. This is just amazing. So I know that sounds like a great big endorsement of Long Beach. I'm not doing that at all. Cities are cities. They have flaws and whatever. But I guess when it just comes to the Queen Mary, it's nice to know that the icon of the city is not going to be ignored. So I think that's just kind of the point I'm trying to make. But yeah, Art Deco says, do you think that 1938 Mauretania is forgotten and overlooked? I don't know about forgotten, but overlooked, I would say. Yeah, I would say overlooked a little bit. Because, that ship, one of its greatest accomplishments was its efforts of World War II as a troop ship and transport and all that sort of stuff. But it gets overshadowed by the original Mauretania, which also did, World War I service and just had this fantastic career. So, yeah, I think it does get a bit overshadowed and probably overlooked. Carter says, are you going to Birth of a Legend in Belfast? I don't know what that is, but when I go to Belfast, we're going to be doing everything Titanic. So if you can name it, we're doing it, because that's the plan. Like, we're going to Belfast to experience everything Titanic we can. As long as it's in Belfast, and as long as it's within walking distance of where the main Titanic stuff is, then we'll be doing it. We'll be doing Nomadic. We'll be doing the museum. We'll be checking out the Titanic dry dock. We'll be checking out the old Harland and Wolff building. We'll be checking out just everything. Like, they have all kinds of stuff. They have the slipway. We'll be checking out the slipway. So everything in that vicinity that's all Titanic related, we will be there. We will be doing it. So yeah, I'm excited for that, really. And they converted the old Harland and Wolff building into a hotel. They call it Titanic Hotel. We're going to stay there. We're going to stay a night there. So I'm excited. I'm I'm ecstatic about it. I can't even tell you guys, because I may not be the biggest Titanic fan in the world, but I have an appreciation for Titanic. And, it would be just so cool to see history, to walk through it, especially with Nomadic. I mean, come on. Have you guys seen videos of Nomadic? It is one of the coolest ships, and it's like it's the closest thing you can get to stepping inside Titanic is being inside Nomadic. Which, by the way, for those of you that don't know, there was a Nomadic lifeboat inside the Queen Mary, and that has been taken back to the RMS. That has been taken back to the SS Nomadic in Belfast for restoration, and then that lifeboat will be on display somewhere around there. So yeah, the Nomadic lifeboat has returned to Belfast. Carter Ashley says, can you send me the link when you visited the Queen Mary in 2020? Unfortunately, I cannot, because the video no longer exists. It was a very cringy video. So people that don't know, I filmed a vlog. The last time I was at Queen Mary was January 2020. I filmed a vlog with my friends, and at the time I was not a Queen Mary expert. The day I was there, the day I stepped foot on the ship, something clicked, and all of a sudden I fell in love with the Queen Mary. So, unfortunately, being there that day and being so fresh and new to being a Queen Mary fan, I didn't know enough about the ship, and here I was looking at Google reading off some fun facts. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation about the Queen Mary on Google. So almost immediately I had people commenting in the chat. They're like, "Oh, you got that wrong. There's a lot of that wrong." They weren't trying to be mean. They were just trying to tell me, like, there's so much you got wrong. And almost everything that came out of my mouth that day was incorrect. And it is kind of embarrassing for someone whose channel is called Alex the Historian to have a video that has nothing but incorrect information in it. So for that reason, I took the video down. It no longer exists. But I do have a video. I can't link it for you right now, but I do have a video. You'll see it actually on the front page of my channel. It is called Queen Mary Narrated Tour. Queen Mary Narrated Tour. And basically, I took all the footage I shot that day and then re-edited it into a very smooth tour video that I overlaid accurate information onto it. And it's a really good video. And I'm going to be making a new video soon I'll be making a new tour video soon using the new footage I have with updated information. And there will be areas that I never got to see originally that will be in the new video. Like I said, my friend filmed the whole ship for me the other day, or at least everything that he could see. So there's new stuff that I could add. and I'm excited to do that. So, Ile-de-France rescued passengers off the Andrea Doria. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Zoljanri says, Alex, I'm from Philippines and I'm a little bit embarrassed because that person who copied your video. It's alright, it happens. It's not a reflection of the Filipino people. I love Filipino people. Some of the greatest people I've ever met were Filipino. So don't worry. It is not a reflection on your country. It's just that one person who just really wanted to do that, you know. But that's okay. That's okay. We settled it. Let's see. Baltic. Oh, interesting. Baltic helped many other ships during her career. Okay. Carter says, I'd like to meet you, and can you come to Tennessee? No, I cannot, unfortunately. I don't do meet and greets anymore. If people see me on the street or something, or they see me at a museum, right? Let's say I go to the Evergreen Museum and you happen to be there that day looking at the Spruce Goose. If I'm there, feel free to say hi. You know, it doesn't matter if I'm filming something. Come up and say hi. I'm the nicest person. I will always take a moment to talk to you. Always. Anybody who's met me in person, sometimes they watch my live chat, so they might be here right now. Anybody who's met me in person knows that when they come up to me and say hi, I always give them the time and day to talk to them. But otherwise, unfortunately, I don't do meetups. I don't go places to meet people, stuff like that. Because, first of all, I used to do that. I used to do that on a twice annual basis. But unfortunately, in the recent years, I've gotten, you know, threats of violence and death against me. So because of that, I try to be very careful. I don't meet up with people anymore. But if you do see me and it's a surprise and I'm on the Queen Mary or something, or maybe you're taking a voyage on the Queen Mary too, or maybe you're at the Evergreen Museum, or maybe you're just somewhere and I'm there too, and you see me, feel free to say hi. I trust anybody who comes up to say hi, fully knowing that they didn't know I was going to be there that day. So, so feel free to say hello. Yeah. Carter Ashley says, do you like Dude Perfect? I'm not sure what that is. Let's see. Marty's Train says, good day from sunny Queensland. Awesome. Hello. Chilling says, I thought the original funnels were replaced with aluminum stand-ins. So, they are stainless steel, not aluminum. They're stainless steel because they can last being outside for a long time, and so aluminum fatigues. Aluminum fatigues in motion and stuff like that. So there's a lot of high wind up there, you know, at the top of the Queen Mary's funnels. And then, of course, the ship does roll with earthquakes or with high winds. So the fatigue, you know, so anyway, the steel backbone of the ship is stainless steel. The outside of the steel backbone of the funnels is stainless steel. And then the outside of the funnel is also stainless steel. But yeah. But it is replicas, so I want to make sure that people know that. The funnels on the Queen Mary today are not the originals. They are stainless steel replicas of the originals, because the originals were removed so that way they could access the boiler rooms below to remove all the boilers and machinery. And in that process of doing that, the original funnels just did not have enough structural integrity left, and they collapsed as they were removed from the ship. So they had to create replicas, and yeah, and the replicas are up there today. Some people say the replicas are 7 feet shorter than the originals. Now, Steve, me, and Steve's friend, who's even more knowledgeable than both of us combined, Rob, he has researched his whole life as well. None of us, the three of us, have ever found any substantial evidence to say that the replica funnels are shorter than the originals. There's no photographs that prove it. There's no documentation that proves it. As far as we know, based off of the information we know, the replica funnels are the exact same size and dimension as the originals. So I don't know where that came from, that people say the new funnels are shorter. I don't think that doesn't seem to be true. Chilling says, can we view Chris's maintenance footage somewhere? Currently, no. He did ask me, he says, Alex, I know I filmed all this for you, but can I still use some of it for my channel? I said, of course. You're my friend. You filmed this for me. Like, by all means, use your footage. So he may or may not decide to put up that footage somewhere. That's up to him. But for now, the maintenance footage, you'll have to wait till, I think, Friday, because I have the video downloaded now. All the footage he shot for me is downloaded. I just need the next couple days to assemble it into an update video, and I think Friday you should be able to see a Queen Mary construction update video. So then you'll be able to see the stuff. Shout out to Brian Vega. Cunard says, with all this great news about the Queen Mary, depending on how true her refurbishments turn out, seems like strong evidence that past lessees were corrupt or incompetent. I totally agree. There is now a lot of evidence that shows that past lessees of the ship were corrupt or incompetent. Just didn't know. I mean, when you look at the companies that operated the Queen Mary, a lot of them just didn't know what to do with her. Some of them were hotel companies. A hotel company is not used to operating a museum. A museum that is in the shape of a ship that must be taken care of like a ship, but operated like a museum, hotel, convention center. So it's very confusing for a lot of these companies. Even Disney didn't quite know what to do, because Disney at the time was not used to operating ships. I'm sure, like, if Disney was there today after having operated Disney Cruise Line, they might know a thing or two about how to market and take care of the Queen Mary, but they might destroy the ship in the process of trying to keep it fresh and new. Nevertheless, in the 1990s, or late 80s, early 1990s, the company didn't know anything about taking care of a ship that was a museum, that was a convention center, that was a hotel. So they just did what they could, and it still wasn't the right solution. But I think to run the Queen Mary properly, to make her a successful tourist attraction, you need people who can think outside the hotel box. People who can think outside the museum box, and who can think outside the building box. It needs to be a ship, So it takes creative people to know what to do with the ship. And I know Long Beach listens to me. I know some people in Long Beach who have watched my videos. So I know Long Beach listens to me. I don't know that they watch these live streams, but Long Beach, if you're listening, you just make sure that the people who are operating the ship know that it's not just a museum, it's not just a ship, it's not just a hotel. It's a combination of the three, and it's a unique thing of its own. And so therefore it takes unique ideas to make the ship successful. And I think they know that. Oh, by the way, the reason why I say I know that they watch my stuff is because, you see, I put out a few videos in the past that recommended things for the Queen Mary, and from the construction stuff I saw, they have implemented some of the ideas I just so happened to have put out online. So I did that for free because I knew I'm not going to be the kind of person that's like, give me money for my ideas. I mean, I probably should, but I love the ship so much that I'll give my ideas away for free if it means that the ship will be successful. So I put out those ideas in videos before, and somebody in Long Beach took note and implemented some of them, even to small degrees, not like huge, but small degrees. And I think that's good. I think that's really, really good. I think people are really impressed with the tours that they took the past couple days, and I think that's a reflection of that. Yeah. So good on them. Good on them. Brian says, this is my birthday. Sing happy birthday. I can't sing happy birthday for everybody that has a birthday, but happy birthday to you, Brian. I really do hope you have a good one. Here's what he says. Is there any ideas where the dry dock that Long Beach is planning will be? They're not at that stage yet where they know where it's going to go. Right now they're doing surveys throughout the entire Long Beach coastal area to see where the best place would be for a dry dock, because it can't be somewhere that will impede the flow of the very important container ships that come by and drop off containers, and it can't impede the flow of future cruise ships that might come into port, because currently they only have one cruise ship terminal. It's the Carnival terminal, and that terminal is only capable of supporting one ship at a time. They want to expand the terminal to at least hold 2 ships at a time. So there might be a change of how ships are moved in and out of the area, and depending on that, they will need to make sure the dry dock doesn't impede that flow of movement. So they're just kind of checking to see, but they don't know yet where it's going to be. It might actually be pretty close to the Queen Mary. There's a pod there. I have an idea of where it might go, and it's just, I don't know if that's southwest, just southwest of the Queen Mary, along a really long stretch of pier side shoreline. I think it might go there, honestly. But I mean, I'm not an engineer, so I don't know. But yeah. Brian says, how about Queen Mary crashing into HMS Curacao? Chris says, hey Alex, my friend Ron, who was a Navy SEAL, says to me that the RMS Titanic was a weak ship, but I told him it wasn't, but he was too brainwashed by the media and told that the ship was weak. Yeah, unfortunately there's a lot of people who think that. I don't know where that notion came from, that Titanic was such a weak ship. It just, yeah. Anything that is almost a quarter of a mile in length and is the size of a skyscraper, and you try to move it into a position it was never designed to be built for, does not make it weak. You know, like, I don't know where people got that idea. It's like literally picking up, you know, it's like literally picking up the Eiffel Tower and holding it on its side and going, oh, why is it breaking apart? It's supposed to be strong. It's like, it's because it was designed to stand upright, not sideways. And the same thing for a ship. Ship is designed to lay in the water, not be lifted out of it. You know, so, well, not lifted out of it, like, unevenly, I mean. Alex, no, I didn't know that the Adriatic was the first ship to have a Turkish bath and swimming pool. Pretty cool. Jackson says, in terms of the Queen Mary's restoration, do you think there is any hope of them restoring the first-class pool? You know, people asked me that just weeks ago, before I saw Chris's footage of the work that's being done. And I said no. I said no, it's probably the lowest thing on their priority, and it probably still is the lowest thing on their priority right now, but the footage that he showed me, I saw repairs were done to stuff that was breaking. I don't know if you guys know, but some of the wall fixtures, the light fixtures, were actually coming off of the wall and like kind of like crooked. They fixed that, and they repaired them so they shine light again. I did not expect them to do that. I really did not expect them to even lay a finger in that room at all, and they did. That room is now brighter, so when you walk up to the window, you can look in and you can see it better. That room's now brighter. Well, that also has to do with the fact that they repaired the light fixtures. But I did not expect them to do that, you guys. And that kind of got me excited. That made me think, you know what? Like, they just might. They just might make it a priority, you know, in the near future. By near future, I mean, like, within, like, a year, they might start planning it out. But But yeah, I did not expect them to even lay a finger in that room. But they did. They fixed the light fixtures before they completely fell off the walls. And yeah, I think that is really good. I think that's really, really good. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it could definitely be a possibility now. I just felt so much more hopeful after seeing all that footage of all the stuff they did. I was like, wow, stuff is actually getting done. The ship does look better than it did when I left that final time in 2020. Looks a lot better than it did back then. So, alright. Justin says, who would ever threaten you, Alex? Love your live streams. By the way, the Imperator was 52,000 tons versus Britannic. It's 48,000. Interesting. You know, people are just... I think some people go stir crazy being at home all the time or something. I don't know, but they see something they disagree with you on, and if you kind of hold your ground, they get insulted by that. And it's like I said, like the first person to give me a death threat was this guy. I created a thumbnail for my video called The Rolling Mary, right? And The Rolling Mary is about the different various stories of Queen Mary's rolling at sea. Just storms, maybe there was a rogue wave, all that kind of stuff. Thing is, the most famous event that happened to the Queen Mary in terms of rolling was when she was struck by a 92-foot rogue wave and rolled nearly 52 degrees off vertical. 3 more degrees, she would have completely capsized. And unfortunately, there's no photograph of that incident because the ship was by itself in the ocean. So there was no other person around to photograph the ship being hit by a rogue wave. You know, it doesn't exist. So for the thumbnail of the video, I needed something. So I created a photoshopped image of the Queen Mary being struck by a rogue wave because the video needed a thumbnail. It needed something exciting. And the guy thought it was clickbait. He goes, this is clickbait. That's not a real photo. I'm like, it's only clickbait if the subject matter of the video is not present. So if I promise a rogue wave, but then don't talk about the rogue wave at all in the video, that's clickbait. Like, but this isn't clickbait. This actually happened, and I mentioned it at great detail in the video. And he got so mad. He was just like, you know, wait till I find you. Your days are numbered. You know, and he's just like, I was just like, what is wrong with people? And then, you know, and then there's other people who just randomly, like, this one guy was trying to tell me, oh, Long Beach is going to scrap the ship. I'm like, actually, they voted not to. And he's like, no, you're lying and blah, blah. I'm like, I'm not lying. I'm like, it's just the city's going to fix the ship. They're currently undergoing maintenance. And he's like, stop spreading misinformation. I'm going to kill you, blah, blah, blah. You know, and I'm just like, wow. Like, these are not normal people, you guys. So, I know that. I know that they're not. They're just people that need some serious help. Put it lightly. But yeah. I remember my days visiting Disneyland back when I was only doing Disneyland content. I used to tell people when I would be in the park. So that way, if they were there that day, they could come say hi. I had to stop doing that because one day I told people, oh, I'll be on Main Street at this time of day. So if you are here and you want to say hi, come say hi. This guy walks up to me on Main Street. Goes, you Alex the Historian? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, hi, I know your channel. I'm like, oh, great. You know, I'm like trying to have a conversation with him. And then he like just rants about how he hates what I do and, you know, and he hates like how I do things. He's like, oh, your videos are over dramatic and you can't just, you know, why don't you just do this, this, and that, blah, 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 you know. And he's like yelling at me. And I just looked at him, I'm like, sir, I'm like, I make the videos that I like to make. I'm like, I'm sorry if you don't like to watch them, but you don't have to watch them. You know, I'm like, I do this because I love to do it. I want to see videos like the videos I make. And no one else does it, and so I do it. You know, but I was just like, dude, this guy, you know, I'm like, what if this was one of those people that wants to kill me? You know, so like this guy almost looked like he wanted to punch me in the face. He just hated my content. I'm like, why did you come here to tell me how much you hate me? I didn't understand it. So that's the kind of stuff I face. So it's unfortunate. Thankfully there's not a lot of YouTubers that get that. I'm so thankful for that. But for some reason I have become that target, I think. And I think probably what makes me more that target is that I don't lay back and just take what, you know, they say to me. If they tell me like, oh, I hate your channel, blah, 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 I will tell them, well, I'm sorry you hate my channel, but you don't have to watch. And they don't like that I say that. I think they expect me to go, oh, well, maybe I'll change or blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to change. You know, like, people like what I do. That tells me enough that I should keep doing it, you know? So I think that's what upsets them the most, is that they don't get to win. And I think that's what sets them off. So, but yeah. Brian says, question, Alex, which is better, RMS Queen Mary or RMS Olympic? Oh, okay. Well, first of all, disclaimer. I welcome everybody's personal opinion. If you love the Olympic, you think it's way better than Queen Mary, hats off to you. That is, you know, your personal perspective. You love the ship, and you are perfectly welcome on this channel to talk all about Olympic. I may not be able to answer questions because I don't know enough, but, you know, hats off to people who have a specific ship that they love the most. For me, the ship I love more than any other ship in the world is the Queen Mary. It's just, you know, I just fell in love with the Queen Mary. I love it more than Olympic. I've never really been that big a fan of the Olympic class ships, but that doesn't mean I can't appreciate their history. I appreciate the history of Olympic, the design of Olympic, the engineering and all that stuff that goes into it, you know, so I don't have to hate a ship in order to love. I think that's another thing too, is a big misunderstanding about how I feel about SS Normandy. I would never want to spend a night on the SS Normandy, but if the SS Normandy was still around and I could walk around for a day and take some pictures and video, I would. I can appreciate the Art Deco French style of SS Normandy. I just wouldn't want to spend a night on it, that's all. So yeah, I think that's kind of like my opinion about Olympic class ships. Conrad says, maybe past operators of Queen Mary are the ones who started rumors about being in poor condition. That is a part of it. Some past operators used to tell the city of Long Beach, you need to give us $10 million because the ship needs this, this, and that, or else something bad will happen to it. And Long Beach goes, the terms of your lease agreement is that you pay for all expenses. And the company goes, but our lawyers say that under this specific stipulation, you have to give us money. And in order to force Long Beach to give them money, they would tell the media, oh, the ship needs this and that because it's so desperately needed, and the city of Long Beach does not want to support us by giving us $10 million. And Long Beach is going, your contract says you're in charge of it, but because you're a corporation and you hate spending money, you're going to try to get a city to pay for it, you know? And so that's kind of what would go on occasion. And what would happen is Long Beach would give them the money to quiet them down and just say, here, just take the money, do the fixes. And in some cases, not all of them, but in some cases, that money would not go towards the project it was supposed to go towards. The company, who under the master lease... Okay, let me give you a more specific one. This happened between Urban Commons and the city of Long Beach. Again, the terms of the master lease, which is what it was called, means that all responsibilities of the ship go towards Urban Commons, not towards the city of Long Beach. It was a lease that was created in the early 80s. Long Beach cannot change it. And when you buy into the lease, that's what it says. Well, Urban Commons says, well, we need $23 million worth of money to renovate the ship. And Urban Commons says, look, I know our agreement says that we have to pay for it ourselves. They said, but we can't afford it. They said, if you give us $23 million to repair the ship and do all these things, we will then use the new success of the refurbished ship to create this bigger project called Queen Mary Island, where there is a massive shopping and dining district, and it will generate tons of money for the city of Long Beach. And all you have to do is invest a fraction of that money into the ship. And Long Beach's hands are tied. The media goes, oh, well, Long Beach doesn't want to give money to the ship. They expect other people to take care of it. How awful. So Long Beach goes, okay, here's $23 million. And the contract says Long Beach has no control over what kinds of delegation. You see, it's really complex. What kinds of, delegation of funds is done to the ship under the master lease. So if Long Beach decides to give them money, the terms of the master lease says that the company that leases the ship is in charge of delegating that money to the proper channels of restoration. Unfortunately, under Urban Commons, a great deal of that money, probably 80% of it, if not more, was actually funneled into private bank accounts of the CEO and CFO of that company. It was laundered money, and they're currently facing litigation for that. And so people looked at the city of Long Beach and said, you did not make sure that that money went to the proper channels. But Long Beach is like, we can't. The master lease agreement prevents us from intervening unless we know that they're not going to spend the money correctly. If they had a hint that the company was going to launder the money, then they could have stepped in. But they didn't know. So therefore, they had no choice. And so, anyway, long story short, Urban Commons, after the ship closes, no money coming in, they go bankrupt. They try to sell the master lease, and that's what happens. Every time a company gives up on the ship, they can sell their lease to another company to earn that money back, at least, or try to earn some of it back. Unfortunately, the ship has been through so many sales of the master lease that no company wanted to buy the ship, especially knowing what the media was saying at the time, which was that at any moment the ship will capsize, which was not true. Not true information at all. They took what an engineer said out of context. He did say that. He did say the ship... He said very specifically, if I remember every word to the tiniest degree, he said, if nothing is done in the next 2 years, it could lead to the ship's capsizing and sinking. But the media made it sound like it's gonna happen. The ship is gonna capsize. And so what happens? No company wants to buy the lease. Why would you want to pay, I think it was $15 or $20 million on a lease for a ship that the media says is about to sink? Who is going to do that? So what ended up happening was Urban Commons could not sell the master lease to anybody. And because of that, the law stipulates that the ship must have an owner, so therefore the master lease becomes null and void, and all control goes back to the city of Long Beach. And thank God for that, because now the ship is in much better condition because Long Beach is taking care of it. And Long Beach has no plans to make another lease and lease it to anybody else. Long Beach has cut out that middleman. Long Beach will take full responsibility for the ship, and they have hired a company to manage the hotel and business portion of the ship. They are a very trusted company. They're kind of like one of those staffing companies, except they're kind of bigger than a staffing company. They provide all the services of a hotel and everything, and they do all that. So Evolution Hospitality is the one that does the day-to-day operations of the Queen Mary, and they have been hired by the city to do that, but they are not in any they don't have any control over the ship. So that is a very good combination, I think. I think there was a lot of worry. People were like, oh no, you can't have a ship operated by a city. They're going to destroy it. But, I mean, it appears that the best case scenario has come out of it. So it's like, I'm happy for it, you know? So yeah. Years of Sea says, what year did Queen Mary have an explosion near her hull during World War II? I want to say 1944. 1944, I think the ship was just off the Irish coast and 300 yards off the port side. Yeah, no. Yeah, 300 yards off the port side, there was a huge explosion in the water. Just rocketed water like 90 feet into the air. And people have since speculated, what could it be? Some people thought it was a torpedo that had prematurely exploded before hitting the Queen Mary. But the most likely scenario is that it was a magnetic mine. So there's underwater mines that operate by being triggered by the magnetic field of a large ship. And you see, the Queen Mary had a degaussing strip along her hull. That's what that big, what looks like a pipe that wraps around the ship's hull during World War II only is for. It's a degaussing strip to neutralize the magnetic field of the ship's hull to prevent mines from exploding around it. But if that was a mine that exploded, and it was 300 yards away, how useful was the degaussing strip? It makes you wonder, did the degaussing strip even help at all? At any point in time, the ship could have been destroyed by a mine. How crazy is that? How crazy is that? Jackson says, if you could pick one now gutted room to restore on the Queen Mary, what would it be? Okay, a gutted room, because there are some rooms that are abandoned but not gutted. But if I were to pick a gutted room on the Queen Mary, I would choose... Let's see. I suppose it would have to be... Well, let's say it's gutted and unoccupied, because there are gutted rooms that are still occupied. So let's say it's gutted and unoccupied. I would say the third class main restaurant. So the third class had a restaurant on our deck, just forward of the midship restaurant that everybody goes to for Sunday brunch. That restaurant is like 2/3 of it is completely gutted, and it's used as storage, the whole thing. So I would have that whole thing restored. But if I had to choose one that was gutted but still occupied for hotel tourists, I would choose the third class main lounge, which was on A deck. Third class main lounge on A deck. Today, that third class main lounge has been subdivided into several rooms, one of them being the Cunard story experience, and the other being a little museum area. I would want to restore... Actually, that was the smoking room. I'm sorry, that was the smoking room. It would be... So yeah, I would want them to restore the third class smoking room on A deck. And that's that. And then if I had to choose a room that was not gutted, but is abandoned, it would be the second class reading and writing room and library. It was all part of one room. reading, writing room, and library in second class on main deck. That has been subdivided. A lot of the original walls and cabinetry is still there. It's just abandoned and used as storage space. And that would, I think a few of us, back when I was at QMI, we estimated that maybe for $2,000 you could restore it and bring it back. $2,000, that's it, $2,000. That's one of the easiest fixes that you could do and bring back an original space on the ship, is the second class library. So yeah, it's one of those things. I gotta hurry up and do these comments because we're getting on 3 hours now. Oh, be careful, Chris, for the tornadoes and stuff. I've heard that's getting really bad this season. Brian, the train in the background is my personal model railroad. I have a lot of train fans on my channel, so they like to see the train go by. Alex Seaside of Bulgaria. Yes, I was aware that that the last voyage was filmed on Ile-de-France. Hello, Mark. How's it going? It's been a while. Did you say you're planning a Queen Mary 2 crossing? When are you planning? Okay, so I've been planning it for the last year, but I've been trying to save up all the money. And I think by June I should have all the money I need saved up to start booking the trip. So I don't know yet when my voyage will be. It depends on what the availability is when I finish saving up all the money. But I've had help from people who've been donating. You know, there's a link in the description below for donating to my UK trip aboard the Queen Mary 2. And it describes like what will happen, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so they've donated to that, but then the majority of the money I've saved up of my own. I've saved up several thousand towards it, and I'm almost at reaching that goal. So I think by June, I should have all the money necessary to start booking everything. And yeah, we'll see. It might be a winter, like late 2023 voyage. Yeah, might be late 2023. Let's see. Conrad says, your insight into the Queen Mary and the city of Long Beach is the best information I've ever heard from you. I never knew or considered any of that. Thanks for you reading between the lines. I know, yeah, sometimes it just takes that, things on the surface look like they might go one way, and then I've learned over time, I'm like, sometimes if you like dig a little deeper, you'll find a whole new meaning to it. I used to think at first that the city of Long Beach was always this villain of the Queen Mary, but then I found out that they're not the villain. They just, years ago, they put themselves in a position where they could not help the ship for the next 40 years. And 40 years later, the city wants to help the ship, but they're not allowed to. And finally, they're allowed to. And now you have this rebirth. And so it's kind of an interesting story, actually. You could write a book on it. I'm not going to write the book, but somebody could. Let's see. Alex says, yeah, that's a lot, honestly, and I learned some new things. Brian says, yeah, I googled top 10 most haunted ships and Queen Mary popped up. Yeah, Queen Mary is just very highly marketed as a haunted ship. Years of Sea says, you may know this already, but on the 31st of December 1992, the Queen Mary closed but reopened February 26, 1993. Why was it closed, if you know? Yes, that's because Disney was the leaseholder. So Disney overtook the lease of the Queen Mary in 1989 after they bought out the Jack Rather Corporation. Jack Rather Corporation owned and operated the Disneyland Hotel under their own license, and Disney Company wanted to own the Disneyland Hotel, but they couldn't because Jack Rather Corporation wouldn't give it to them. So they bought out Jack Rather Corporation. Now, Jack Rather Corporation was not a bad corporation. They were very, very good. They were trusted by Walt Disney himself to build the Disneyland and hotel and operate it. But the thing is that Disney, as it grew into a huge corporation, became greedy and wanted to own all those profits for themselves. I mean, that's normal. That's not necessarily evil. It's not a bad thing to want to earn more profit. But they ended up buying out the Jack Rather Corporation. Now, what they did when that happened, any leases they had for properties around the world or around the U.S. suddenly became owned by Disney. So Disney owned the lease of the Queen Mary. They didn't own the Queen Mary. They owned the lease of the Queen Mary. And they thought, oh, this might be kind of good to market. And then, Disney was busy building all these theme parks and hotels and stuff at the time, Disneyland Paris and all that. They were busy doing all this stuff, spending all this money. All their best minds were spread out around the world. But here they had the Queen Mary in Long Beach, and they didn't quite know what to do with it. I mean, they're not used to operating something historic as big as the Queen Mary. They do theme parks and entertainment. So they tried to do what they could with the Queen Mary, but they just didn't quite know what to do with it. And eventually they came up with this idea that kind of side-skirted it. They didn't want to fix the ship. They wanted to build something that might pay for fixing the ship. I say might because they wanted to move the Queen Mary 1,000 feet further north to get it out of the way of a new theme park they wanted to build. To be honest, I feel like Disney really didn't care about the Queen Mary. What they wanted was the land that the Queen Mary came with, because they wanted to use the land as a shoreside theme park. And the city of Long Beach, I think the city of Long Beach knew this. Long Beach was kind of like, they don't care about the ship. They just want to build a theme park there. And who knows if that money, if that profit is even going to go back to the ship. There was no way of knowing. So I think the city was just kind of like, no, you can't bully us into agreeing with this. And so Disney said, fine, we're leaving. And they announced in early 1992 that by the end of the year, they were gone. Now, Disney at the time, they operated the ship under all their own power. So they had all their own management systems, all that stuff. Like everything that had to do with the ship was under their control. So because they left, the ship had no one to staff it, no one to keep it open. They needed to find somebody entirely new. So that's why the ship closed for a few months, was the next people to take over the master lease, who purchased it from Disney, they had to hire back all their own people and basically learn how to operate a hotel, museum, convention center ship. Which is no easy task. So, yeah. Alex says, he's out of Bulgaria, says, what is the most interesting thing you learned or simply heard about the Queen Mary? The most interesting thing all had to do with World War II. But what I never considered was that the Queen Mary... I'm sorry, did you say Queen Mary 2 or did you say Queen Mary? Yeah, so Queen Mary was that the ship transported a lot of refugees that were fleeing Europe before World War II. They, various people, including Jewish people who were being persecuted, fled Europe, and the only way to get across the Atlantic, if you had the money for an airplane, which was at the time very pricey compared to what it would be in the same quality today, you might as well be charting a private airplane. So airplanes weren't really an option. You could take, a Zeppelin like the Hindenburg or something and take it across the Atlantic. But most likely the only way you could get across the Atlantic was on a transatlantic ocean liner. And Queen Mary conveniently stopped off in Cherbourg, France, to pick up passengers. So people in Germany, Poland, Austria, all that stuff, they would flee their countries, come to Cherbourg, book passage on the Queen Mary, and flee to the United States. The United States did not take everybody who came in. They had this, that's a whole other issue with history, but essentially they turned a lot of people back. But yeah, you would have to flee aboard the Queen Mary. So there was a lot of people, and what I didn't know... Well, sorry, I got a text. What I didn't know was that... towards the last few voyages, the ship was actually overcrowded. Now, Cunard did not like to overcrowd their ships. They firmly believed in having a comfortable amount of people on the ship so all their passengers felt good. Well, Cunard knew there were people fleeing for their lives, and they threw out the idea of a comfortable capacity, and they took anybody they could fit. There were people sleeping in cots along the corridors. Can you imagine the first-class corridors filled with cots of refugees, families, and stuff sleeping? J.P. Morgan Jr., the son of the famous, business magnate, he was on a voyage, and he saw all these families sleeping, and he offered part of his suite. A suite has several rooms. He offered part of his suite to some of the families that were sleeping in the hallways. And, so that was just something I didn't know about the ship. And, the Cunard crew tried as best they could to comfort people, which is something you just don't really hear about. You think of Cunard ships, you think hoity-toity, British, don't talk to me peasant kind of thing. But there was this great big, coming together. Cunard stood firmly against Hitler and Nazi Germany. When they built the Queen Mary was the first ocean liner to be constructed with a synagogue on board and 2 kosher kitchens on board for serving all their Jewish passengers. Ships that had it added after. They didn't have it added in the very beginning. So Queen Mary was the first one to have it all put in all at once at the same time as construction. It was a giant middle finger to Hitler, basically. And it was pretty cool. So that's one of those things I didn't know, was just how important the Queen Mary was to Jewish heritage, but not just Jewish heritage, to everybody who fled the Nazis in Europe. Everybody. So it was a big deal. And, none of the passengers were treated differently. People ask me, if you were black, what were you treated like on the Queen Mary? You were treated just like every other passenger. No better, no worse. They did not believe in discrimination on a Cunard ship. They just did not believe in it. You paid for the trip, you get what you pay for. And that's one of the greatest things about the Queen Mary, is you hear all these stories about racism and prejudice in the 1930s, but that was not a thing for Cunard on Queen Mary. So that was one of the coolest things to learn about the Queen Mary. So, but anyway, I guess I better go, because it has been 3 hours, and I know I've been trying to get through all these questions, but I can't. There's just so many. Well, actually, I'm almost done, so I might as well. Here we go. Sorry, I thought there was a whole list, but let me just try. Brian says, Alex, if you read this, then everyone watching must like and subscribe and say RMS Queen Mary is the best. No, not necessarily. You don't have to love the Queen Mary to be on my channel. If you're here for trains, then you're here for trains. If you're here for Disneyland, then you're here for Disneyland. You don't have to declare your allegiance to the Queen Mary to be on my channel. By no means. Chilling in the Frozen North's questions was, why was Long Beach not allowed to help preserve and maintain the major investment for 40 years? Well, I already explained all that just minutes ago, and it would take me another 10 minutes to re-say it all again, so I'm not going to do it. But like I said, the stipulations of the lease agreement, the master lease agreement, did not allow them to intervene unless they knew for a fact the ship was going to be at risk of something that violates the contract. And those corporations knew how to make it look like, hey, we're taking care of the ship, we're not violating the contract, don't step in. So that's kind of what it was like. Just to kind of put it simply. Alright. Learn a lesson, calm down, bud. That's strange. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's something going on with Brian Vega. He's deleting a lot of messages. Long Beach needs to learn a lesson and tell them to open the pool rooms. That's a weird way of putting it. But anyway, folks, thank you so much for joining me, and I'm really happy that you all were here. I'm happy I finally got here on a Wednesday and did this. But so Friday, I think, should be the next Queen Mary construction update. Work continues on several videos. I put out a video on Sunday. Nobody, well, not nobody, but a lot of people didn't get the notification. So be sure to just go on the homepage of my channel and catch up. There's a new video called Forgetting You're at Sea. And it's really cool. Very interesting little video. But anyway, folks, I think that's it. I will see you on Sunday for tea time. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.